Always waiting for those next steps to happen. And how's the Sony household? A little bit of news that happened last week here, last Thursday around noontime. We got V&A Hospital. He's taking care of my dad now, and they did a veteran ceremonial here in the house for my dad. He was a veteran of World War II. They gave him a pin, a little American flag, a citation, and a quilt. And the citation was the best thing. It had his name, his U.S. Navy Seaman's SB6 serial number on it and everything, and that went well in this house. When my sister was here, my brother wasn't. He couldn't make it, but that happened here around last Thursday. A veteran ceremony for my dad, long awaited, and we took it in the house. Other than that, everything else in this house is good, and eagerly waiting for the response from the steering committee comprehensive plan of how well the selection is going to be going on. And I thank the town manager for his response. Thank you. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Mark. And thank you for sharing all that about your dad. That sounds like a wonderful thing for your whole family. Is there anyone else here for citizens participation? Okay, seeing none. We're going to go ahead and move right into our first scheduled appointment this evening, because I see we have Ryan Sullivan and John Trefethen. John is the chair of the ZBA, and Ryan is a candidate for associate member of the ZBA. And so thank you both for joining us this evening. Ryan, would you like to go ahead and just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and why you would like to be a part of the ZBA?
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity and for the invite today. My name is Ryan Sullivan. I live over on Hardwick Road here in Ashland. I've been in town now for just about 7 years. I am an attorney, currently practicing as an in-house counsel for a construction company focusing on affordable housing. But in the past, my practice has mostly focused on construction, litigation, and real estate. I do have some zoning experience, though most of my zoning experience is in the city of Boston. I thought that with my background, it might make for a great opportunity to serve the community that myself and my family live in on the board. So that's why I'm interested in joining.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
So, John, I know that, yeah, there you are. Okay. That the ZBA had voted to basically appoint Ryan as an associate member. Is that correct? Do you want to talk a little bit about your process and
Sure. Ryan attended several ZBA meetings. As I know, the select board likes potential candidates to observe our process. He and I exchanged some email correspondence both prior to and after that. And again, thank you for allowing me to participate in tonight's meeting. I should have said that first. The ZBA, our bylaws provide, the town bylaws provide for 3 members and 4 associate members. And until last year, we had gone a couple of years with 1 associate member. And what that meant was that if there was a time when 2 of the members were not able to participate in a hearing for whatever reason, we were not going to be able to have a quorum. We got a second associate member who joined us last year, and Ryan would be the third as we come up to a full capacity of 4 members, hopefully later this year. His qualifications as an attorney obviously has great experience in reading bylaws, interpreting the law, asking questions of applicants. He expressed a desire to, get involved and participate in the community that he's lived in with his children going to school here. And it was a very clear decision by all 5 members and the 3 members and 2 associate members who were present at the meeting, that he would be a fine addition to the ZBA. And we voted unanimously to recommend his appointment by the select board.
Great. Thank you, John. Does anyone have any questions? Steve, go ahead.
Not so much a question, just a comment. Ryan, thank you for your willingness to participate on a very important committee. I mean, we consider any regulatory committee to be of great importance. So I thank you for stepping up. And clearly your livelihood, your expertise is perfectly suited for this role. And, I think we're fortunate to have somebody of your caliber to join the ZBA. And we place, as John described the process, we place a great degree of importance on their support for a candidate. So, I would venture to say we're all going to be very supportive, and I would just say welcome aboard.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments? We're good?
No,
Okay.
good.
So I think at this point,
Yep.
we'll need, is there a
Sure.
motion?
I move that we appoint Ryan Sullivan as an associate member of the ZBA. Is there an expiration date that we have to add or not?
Yes, it would be 8/31.
Thank you.
8:31. Thanks, Susan.
8/31/23.
That's correct, and then we would renew it for another year.
Okay, so I move that we appoint Ryan Sullivan as an associate member of the Zoning Board of Appeals with an expiration date of 8/31/2023.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 5-0. Ryan, congratulations, and thank you so much for wanting to be a part of this.
Thank
We
you
look
for-
forward to great things continuing to come out of the ZBA, and thank you, John, for being here and speaking so highly of your new associate member. So we appreciate all the work that you guys do.
Thank you all.
Great.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good luck, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that was great. Our next scheduled appointment is, we're a little on the early side, but I think that's okay because Beth Reynolds is here in person with us this evening at this point.
Unless you want to wait 15 minutes. I didn't think so.
We're not. But we're happy to have Beth Reynolds, our Economic Development Director, here today to give us a budget update. Michael, do you want to kind of?
Sure. We focused a lot recently, over the last few months, on the general fund for the town of Ashland. But if you all recall, and for those of you that aren't aware and watching at home, several years ago, we created a special revenue account that was funded through the meals tax money that was approved back in 2013. So again, that funding now goes into a special revenue account that we use to fund our economic development and marketing activities. Even though it's not in the general fund, also needs to be voted on at town meeting. So it made sense to have Beth come here today and talk a little bit about that budget. Again, like I said before, it's driven by the meals tax revenue that we receive, and we're anticipating receiving almost $300,000 this year. That's compared to when we first passed the meals tax, it was $150,000. And so, as you all know, as you've had many businesses come here before the board, you know that there's been a lot of restaurants in town, especially coming in and filling some of our more dilapidated and vacant spaces. Thanks largely to the work that Beth has done and our economic development program. And So again, we're just looking to continue that trend, and Beth, I'll turn it over to you. So.
Yeah, just to keep going with that is we are looking for we're looking forward to a really good year. We have some new restaurants or food establishments coming into town, so we're looking to welcome that. All in part, the business incentive program is still thriving, and all three of those businesses hopefully will take advantage of that in some way, shape, or form or of another. So again, that just keeps the meals tax going so that we can do all of these great things in town that everyone loves to see. So just to sort of start off on the budget, Michael talked on where it kind of originates from, but we have hired a new communications coordinator. Melissa Hayes started with us 3 weeks ago. This is her 4th week, so she's hard at work out there right now. So she's working out lovely. So it's a nice addition to our team. This year, I have increased the advertising mailings and photo bucket because Ashland Access was a publication that we did for the first time in July of 2021, and it was a big hit. The residents, we've gotten really good feedback on it. We do this 3 times a year. We did it as the inaugural one. We printed that one, and then we hadn't budgeted for it to print it more than just once. So we do have it digitally on our website, and we will have another one coming out in April, and then we'll do another one in the summer, and then another in the fall. So our goal is to do it 3 times a year, and we'd like to print it 2 times. So that goes right into the local town pages. It goes right to every household. So that's why you see the increase in that line item right there. Then in a little bit further down in holiday decorations, that's a new bucket. So again, listening to our residents, hearing what they want, and they want to see our town lit up at the holidays. It brings joy, it brings a sense of community, it really enhances our holiday stroll that we do. That's now become a very big annual event. So looking at that, looking at our capacity with our team and what it takes to hang lights and provide lights, Joe, I think, can attest to that. It's costly. So we felt that this was, a good use of this funding as well. So that's where you see that line item. Town-sponsored events, corner spot events, they are separate a little bit, but they do kind of overlap. We have some great new events coming up. Earth Day event is coming up. That's a new one. It's great. We're getting our sustainability coordinator involved. Becca, our conservation commission, she's a conservation agent. She's wonderful. She's all involved in it too. So that's a new event. We try to find new openings for all of these events, and we help to support all of the other organizations in town that are doing wonderful things. The Dragonfly Festival, Ashland Day, however we can help with these. We'll do that with through our marketing and support. And then we just have our contracted services. We use Constant Contact for our communications. It works. People seem to like it. It's growing every year. So it's kind of my budget in a nutshell, I think.
Okay, sounds good. Questions, Joe?
Just one quick question. The business incentive, is that the program where companies, businesses will come and to help with the facade or things of that nature?
Right.
Okay.
And we increased that to $80,000 last year. In special town meeting, we had appropriated some additional funding to help additional businesses. So we kept it at that $80,000 instead of the $60,000. So that did stay the
Good.
same.
Thank you.
Yolanda, go ahead.
Not on here, and I'm not sure if it's something you do, but a number of years ago, we started the banner program on our polls. And we put it on hiatus with everything going on in downtown. When do we think we'll be able to bring that back?
When the polls come down.
Okay, so when the polls come down.
Yeah,
Okay,
so right
okay.
now the
That's what I
lampposts that
figured.
are there,
Yeah.
it would impede it to put.
Right, okay.
Because they're up against the
The
existing
polls,
telephone poles.
right, okay.
So, but yes, it is on my
It's on your
radar
radar,
that we need
okay.
to bring back.
The
Right.
polls do have we purchased them with the banner brackets?
Correct.
Yes,
They'll look nice.
okay.
They're
But
putting them up-
otherwise,
They're putting them up on 126 right now too, by the way.
yeah,
If you haven't been.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, I think as you said, there's a lot of great stuff that you and your department are supporting, and certainly the businesses that you've brought into town. I mean, I know I'm looking forward to the new ice cream place downtown, so.
They're gonna get going soon.
Another option.
Yes, absolutely.
But thank you, Beth.
Next door.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions. One, so the business incentive program from last year, did you guys get through all the 80,000 and at basically, would there have been a need for more had there been more money for that? Or like, is 80,000 kind of like the sweet spot for what you feel is needed?
It all depends on the year. Yes,
Okay.
we will expend all of the money this year. And I do think with all of this new development that's coming in, there will be a need for more. A gentleman was in just this week, and he was like, that no one does this. No other towns do this. So it was, he feels good about coming here. There's somebody else out there that's, that I'm talking to that's waiting. Like, I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to see what Ashland comes up with in the next 2 years, because they need space. We need space to put these businesses. They want to do business here. And I think the incentive program is a huge part of that. It just helps. It gives them a little boost, and it shows support that we support them. So I will always want more. So we'll see what these new food establishments bring in and really see how it kind of escalates.
Because I'm just thinking of downtown and how, like, as we bring new businesses in, and then how, like, we redevelop the fire station and all of that, that other businesses would want to be a part of that.
Right.
That general, whether it's the sign in the facade or just general improvements to their businesses, because the downtown is becoming much more of a destination than it.
And we're trying to find ways, my advisory group is looking at ways to really try to push the marketing on the sign and facade, because we want to help the existing businesses here just as much, to really spruce up now that we're seeing all kinds of new things coming to our corridors.
It's taken a little while, but the strategy works. So, right, you put the public in. We've always talked about this. You put the public investment in, and that in turn stimulates
Put skin in the game.
the private sector.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to, comment more than anything else. I'm not a townie. I've only been here since 1975, but I'm going to speak for Joe as well here. But, I don't, when we moved here, there was nothing going on in town, really. I mean, aside from Ashland Day, an annual event, I want to backtrack there. There were things going on. But there
Backpedal now,
there
Steve.
really was not a
You
whole
can tell he's not running for a re-election.
So you know what I'm saying, Joe.
I felt like General Custer.
But it's and for many, many years there really was not a whole lot of the activities, events going on in Ashland at all. And it's only been the last 10, 12 years that this has really picked up momentum. And as the demographic of Ashland has changed, the expectations, the things that the quality of life issues that residents are looking for, it's really dramatic, and I think it was always I think you certainly should feel proud of the corner spot and kind of the momentum that's has taken on, and I feel the same way about the farmers market, and that's kind of generated that community spirit. So it's great stuff, and I think it's important that we have skin in the game, and as local government.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes to just general overall leadership over the last few years. Like you said, the farmers market, you got the Dragonfly Festival, that started about 10 years ago, 10 years. This year is going to be the 10th
This
anniversary.
is the 10th this year. The farmers market is 12, and Corner Spot is
Is
6.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Time flies.
And, you look at some of the stuff happening at the library as well. But I think your point's well taken. It's definitely
Good stuff.
increased.
Good job.
I agree. Thanks. You too. Right back at you.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions on the budget for Beth? No?
No?
I'm good.
Great.
No, this
Thanks
has to
for
go in
having
front of the town. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Beth.
Yeah, this will be part of this. we will need to vote on it at town meeting. It is part of the budget article, but again, it's separate from the general fund, so.
Okay, that was gonna be my next question. Okay, so it's separate, okay.
Special.
Special.
Oh, boy.
Thanks.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Beth.
Okay. So moving on in our agenda, under old new business, discuss engineering for sidewalk or multimodal path on Route 135. I know we had an estimate in our packet from GCG. Michael, do you want to kick this off?
Yeah, I mean, we have talked for a while about the need to do a sidewalk from, essentially the middle school over to the community center, or Indian Spring technically. Originally, that was going to be accomplished when the Valentine Estate was proposed to be developed. The developer at the time had indicated that he would build that sidewalk as part of his development. Obviously, over the course of the years, we made the decision to purchase the property ourselves, and so that option went away. So we now have to look at doing this ourselves, which is something that we're glad to take on. If you recall, when we were discussing the usage of our local allocation of ARPA funds, one of the things that came up was the subject of sidewalks and doing sidewalks, and obviously this really rose to the top priority. And so funding was allocated for that. And so the first part of the process of doing that is you have to go through the design phase. Now, originally when I had asked for this to be put on the agenda, it was to determine whether or not we wanted to do a sidewalk or a multimodal path. Since that time, I've talked to Doug a little bit more, and we think a multimodal path is probably going to be very, very difficult to accomplish.
Because of the space.
Just because of the space limitations. So this would be looking at doing a sidewalk, and the engineering work associated, the survey, the engineering, the permitting work associated with that. And it comes out to about $35,000.
That's for the engineering design
Correct. And the permitting.
and the permitting.
Michael, wait a minute, so before we, so this is, we're not gonna review, this isn't gonna be a technical review of the feasibility of a multimodal path?
I think it would be just talking to Doug today and looking at some of the property lines, I think it would be extremely difficult to do that.
Well, but well, I think that's part of what I wanted to see in the analysis, because we do takings all the time. Are we talking about a few feet? How bad, I'd like to see that mapped out before we just kind of say, there's nothing there that we can do. Does this proposal include that feasibility?
Not that no, it does not include that feasibility. I mean,
So does a multimodal path how much wider would it have to be? Like, what is because I think that's probably the issue, is the width,
Yeah.
given
Yes,
the
And also,
space
it can
constraints.
go into the current street. I mean, there's studies that show if you narrow the street, it isn't more unsafe, it's just the traffic is more rational. So, I mean, there may be ways of doing this. I just don't want to say it's out of question without seeing exactly why. Because I think it'd be a very valuable thing, especially for kids. I mean, Claudia's here, maybe, taking their bikes to school and things like that, and other people using it, and going to the Valentine State in the state park and the community center. We're just kind of saying, we're just passing that up. I mean, I'd just like to be rigorous about that analysis before we say no.
What would it take for, kind of a reasonably quick analysis of what a modal path would?
I'm trying to think about how to solve this. I mean,
Yeah.
so you think about, so a sidewalk is 5 feet, right? We would need to do a 5 feet sidewalk, and a multimodal path would at least be 8 feet. So we're already going to have some issues with the sidewalk, simply because the way the poles are situated, they're going to be practically in the middle of the sidewalk, which is going to, provide some kind of prohibition in regards to ADA accessibility and things like that. So, we have to consider that. What I could do is this, so the first part of this would be a survey. And so what we could do is we could go ahead and move forward with the survey part of it. And then, after that's done, we would have a better idea of what the lot lines were and kind of
Yeah.
what that could.
I
what that
think
could
that to go to
potentially be.
Rob's point, I think that's reasonable to do. I'm not sure if there's any other of the kind of new construction that we've done that would be considered a multimodal path at this point.
Part of Route 126.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which part? I can.
The southern part.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, the Shaw's part.
And you could think of the route along the Memorial Drive as. a
Right,
multimodal.
and
Yeah,
well,
that's
that
true.
is part, I
Okay.
mean, that
Yeah.
is,
so I think it's, if we could, during that survey phase, I think it makes sense to at least have the engineers
I
here
would-
give a weigh in on this.
yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think to at least, to not at least look at it and determine if it's feasible, we would sort of lose our opportunity to do that. And I think because we aren't sure yet what's gonna happen with the trail, if we can make this a multimodal from the middle school or somehow from Memorial Drive, then that would be a positive. And if it doesn't need to go via the State Park Road to get to the trail, then okay, but it would be silly of us to not at least look at it now and make a determination before we put shovel to ground to create just a plain sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it'd be silly. I mean, you've got a highly paid professional that is our director of public works saying that it would be pretty infeasible to do it. So I think that should merit some kind of
So you
I mean, it
consideration.
does, but I think that let's at least take a look at it, right? Because we're not even sure yet which side of the road we're gonna do it, right? We're looking at
that's
different
part of the
things.
analysis,
So that's
yeah.
part of the analysis. So certainly on one side of the road, it might may be one way to do it, but on the other side, there might be more space. So I'd like us to at least look at that before we dismiss
Just
it.
not, I mean, this pushes it out a
That's
little bit
fine.
longer.
I
So
think
you're
that's
gonna
okay.
You're gonna, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
That's okay,
interrupt
no,
you,
I'm
but
set.
Rob interrupted me, so I figured I could interrupt you.
There you go.
Uh,
We're even now.
Not quite sure how that works, but sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So, I'm trying to square this off in my mind. A standard sidewalk is 5 feet with a curbing. So you have a dedicated area for people to walk, kids to walk. If they ride their bikes, they can still use the sidewalk to ride their bikes to go to school. I'm just thinking of the kids. I'm not thinking of,
Yeah.
the average cyclist who loves to, ride their bikes on the weekends or weekdays or whatever. So my concern is the safety of the kids. Now, you're telling me we're gonna narrow that road area 3 feet, an additional 3 feet for a multimodal path. That doesn't, to me, because of my safety concerns, that doesn't make much sense for a road that's busier than hell Monday through Fridays when the kids are going to school. And now we're thinking about narrowing that specific area 3 feet.
Well-
I don't know. I don't know if that's the right thing to do.
If I may, Madam Chair, I think one of the things to realize, Joe, is traffic studies, and you know this, have shown that if you narrow the roadway, it does slow down traffic, right? So, and the 3 feet may not have to be taken completely from the road. Maybe it'll be a little bit more into the properties, right? So they don't know, and that's part of what the survey would do, is determine, does it make sense to do an 8-foot versus a 5-foot? And where would that be taken from? I don't think we could automatically say that it's gonna be 3 feet taken from the road or not. And as I said, narrowing roads, it has shown that it slows the traffic down.
To a degree.
Not in Massachusetts.
Not in Mass, yeah, I was gonna say, you do any traffic study,
I mean, like I suggested, I mean, why don't I just go ahead and get the survey done?
Yeah, let's do that.
absolutely.
Definitely get the
I don't-
survey
I don't
done.
We're gonna have to do that anyway?
Yeah, so
Right.
I have a question that's not reflected in the backup, and so we're not sure which side of 135, if it's on the westbound side, or it makes no difference. How are folks going to traverse getting across 135?
So one thing that this does not include that needs to be included is the crosswalk. No, the crosswalk.
Right.
So it's either gonna be on the Spring Street side or the community center side, somewhere there needs to be a
Potentially,
crosswalk.
yeah.
Which is actually considered the eastbound side because now you're heading east. on 135.
Right, so if you're on, if
On
you,
the community
Gotcha.
center side, that's the eastbound side. Westbound side is heading towards Hopkinton.
Got, yeah.
We had talked about like one of the ones with the flashing lights,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
because
Right.
Oh,
that's the-
yeah.
we're gonna need something that really catches
Because that
people's
was a
eye.
bone of contention
Yep.
and concern with the traffic study group when we were
Right.
talking about that last Tuesday, is that how are these kids, if we put the sidewalk in, we're gonna have to put a lighted crosswalk there. Now, again, it's educating the drivers that are operating 135 on a daily basis that when those lights are flashing, they need to stop.
Yep.
Then you better hope to God they stop, because if the kids start walking across when those lights go on and the motorist doesn't, you're gonna have a problem.
well, but it's also educating our kids, right? Just, you know, just because come on, let's be real, just because the light is flashing doesn't mean you just walk. You still have to look at what's going on with traffic.
I
Right?
get that, but no
So
different than the lights on
Oh, anywhere,
Front Street.
anywhere that there's a light,
right?
right, as a pedestrian.
Those lights are flashing, okay, it's time for me to cross, but you still
Yeah.
have people that,
So,
we
so
didn't
I'll go
realize.
ahead and make sure
Yeah,
that the
go ahead.
proposal is revised to include a crosswalk, and we'll do
Yeah.
the survey.
That would be,
Right,
that would
and,
be
and,
recommended.
and determining where the best, you know, depending on what side they put the sidewalk, will determine where that crosswalk is. Right. Okay.
And did GCG give a timeline for how long the survey component would take?
No, they didn't break it down that way, but
Okay.
I can find that out pretty easily.
Because I think having a sort of a timeline as to what we're looking at, because I would assume we'd
See if
want to
you
get
get
it,
it on the,
we'd be trying to get it done before,
Westbound side,
by the fall,
you don't have
right?
to go all the way down
Like
to the
from a
middle,
time
the middle
perspective,
school. Because now
before,
you
you know
have-
what I'm saying? Before,
That would be
They
ideal,
already
have
but
sidewalk, right.
I don't want to put a commitment on it yet.
Okay.
so.
But that causes the kids to have to cross the street.
Could be a while, yeah. Okay. Well, it'd be good to get, this, I think the survey is a good call. So,
Okay.
do you want to? We'll open it up for public comment. We have Claudia Bennett here with us tonight.
Thank you, Claudia Bennett, 9 Sandstone Way. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this just because I have had some personal experience with it this year. And actually spoke to Mrs. Magnani, the crossing guard there earlier in the year. In terms of, there are about 6, 7, 8 kids that actually walk to the middle school from the eastbound side. Early in the year, I think it might have been the second day of school, I happened to be up there and watched the kids trying to cross the street to get, so they were walking, you know, against traffic, as you're supposed to do, and really need to be doing on a street that's as busy as 135. And it actually took them over a minute and a half to get the cars to stop. And I was talking to Joe about this the other day, part of the issue there was that the cars coming, it wasn't, I think that most of them weren't willing to stop. They thought the kids were waiting for a bus, so they just kept zooming along. And then finally they did stop and the kids crossed. So I would think that, at least for school purposes, that it would make sense to run the sidewalk on the eastbound side, because then they could walk down to Mrs. Magnani or the crossing guard, and then they could cross with her, and in the afternoon, as they currently do, they would cross with her to come up against traffic. And then, you know, even some of luckily we didn't have terrible weather, but once they started the construction on that house, and, you know, even there were a couple of times where there was some snow or that along this side of the road, really reduced it further for these kids. I think some of them come through the woods on bike when it's available, and so they're on 135 for a shorter distance. So that's good, but there are kids that, and lots of times, you know, honestly, they get rides. But since it is a school area, and we do have children that walk there, and they cannot take a bus for free, then I think that, you know, we need to have some kind of a sidewalk or something there. There is a sidewalk that currently comes down from Franklin Road, but it ends at about where the Carrots is.
Yeah,
And then there's nothing until you get to like the mobile station.
Indian Spring, yeah.
Right. And then on the other side of the street, there's nothing. On the eastbound side, there's nothing until you get down, I think, around Murphy's maybe.
Yeah.
So I mean, one thing even for now is maybe put some kind of a, you know, even sometimes the orange barrels upside down, that for the kids, if they're crossing there, or just so that people think that, oh, there might be something happening here, right? I don't know, just an idea. But in any case, that's just what I've experienced, and I know that we'll continue to have children coming from that direction, so.
So you're supportive of this?
I'm very
Right.
supportive of
Okay.
that.
Thanks, Claudia. Okay, so next steps are to have GCG revise this estimate and start working on a survey.
Yeah.
Michael, will that survey also include land taking?
It will identify the property lines, and we can, look at some hypotheticals and see, how many parcels it would affect, and
And
how deep.
that would depend on which side of the street we end up doing this on.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And just, it does, so you got to understand, when you do takings, it's not just like, okay, you do a taking of the land. There's a whole bureaucratic process.
We know.
Well, I just want to make sure.
I know Jen had to do that when we did the path.
The Riverwalk, and actually it was done on 126, but MassDOT handled all
Right.
that. So
Well,
I
we
didn't
had
have
to do it when
any
we
of that.
did the sidewalk up at House Street,
Yeah,
right?
that went
From the
pretty
House
smoothly,
Street
as I
to down to
recall.
Ramblewood, we
Looking
did that,
huge.
Yeah,
We did a
So-
land taking to build the public safety building.
right,
on the gift, yeah.
so.
Oh,
But,
yes.
but also, no, that's the taking piece. I didn't finish. You may have to look at drainage improvements. You may have to look at building retaining walls.
Right.
It can get expensive pretty quickly, so.
And will their estimate then give us, I don't think I saw this, they'll give us contract documents for bidding. Will they be able to give us some kind of estimate as to what it would cost to build it? Okay.
Yeah, so that'll be the first phase, when they get the first design done,
Okay.
25% and the 75% design. They'll have a cost estimate
At
associated.
75%?
Yeah.
Okay. And they'll work closely, Doug will work closely with them, I take it, our planning and
Yeah.
conservation and, okay.
Yeah,
Will
so
road
GCG.
Will our road safety committee have any?
No.
Doug is part of that, so.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
okay,
he-
okay.
but-
So he'll just keep us abreast as to what's going on.
Yeah, and we'll,
Okay.
we'll make sure that, everybody's updated.
Okay.
Top of that. Just-
One last question. Michael, is there a standard sidewalk width or expectation that you guys, like, for example, you could have a wider sidewalk and you could have it set off from the road? Like, many of our sidewalks are just right up against the road. So
Right,
is there any
right.
discussion about how a sidewalk, like?
Yeah,
is
that
something
could be,
we'll see?
you mean talking about a little barrier, like a
Yeah,
barrier
like
grass
you'd have
strip or
maybe,
something?
Yeah, some 2 or 3 feet, and then maybe there's a nice wide sidewalk instead of our usual
Yeah,
narrow-
that's something that we can,
think about. Anyway, something to,
You wouldn't be
something
able
to
to do
think
the
about.
multimodal path then?
Right, so
Right,
it's,
if you're-
it's-
if
I'm
you're-
just looking at different alternatives.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Right.
okay.
So unless anyone else has anything
Nope.
further, we'll move on.
Thanks, Mike.
In our agenda, the next item is a discussion of the PFAS advisory from Department of Environmental Protection. There were actually two things that were in our packet. One was the fish advisory at the
At
Ashland
Ashland
Reservoir.
Reservoir.
Yep, and then the other part was information that Attorney Mead had given us regarding sort of the changes in regulation.
Yeah, so just, very quickly, so PFAS, after doing some targeted testing throughout the state, PFAS, which is a set of chemicals that have been proven to be toxic and dangerous to humans, was found not in the water at elevated levels that were dangerous, but in the fish to a certain extent. So DEP has put out an advisory related to that, and for those people who eat fish out of the reservoir, DEP is advising that no fish be eaten by children 12 and under, and if you're an adult and you're eating fish out of the reservoir, that you limit it to one fish meal a month. So
From the reservoir.
from the reservoir, not in general. Ashland Res, correct.
So
Okay,
in the
so-
state park?
In the Ashland
Okay.
State Park.
So have they done a test on the fish that are dropped off in there by the state to see what levels of?
Yeah, I don't think so, Joe. They didn't get into like their
Because I'm kinda
methodology of
curious as to
testing.
Where this
where this product is coming from,
It is,
to be very honest with you.
it is interesting. And I think some of these other communities are having very similar conversations as well,
Yeah.
so.
So, but just, the actual reservoir is fine, so if there's people swimming, it's completely safe. There's no issues with drinking water. This is just purely the fish.
This is purely the fish in the Ashland Reservoir.
But
Yeah.
it goes to the question of
Right, yeah.
drinking water as well, because we do test now for PFAS, right? We do get,
Yeah, so that leads to the second thing,
Well,
which.
Before we go on to that,
Yeah.
I think we ought to be somewhat concerned about why there's PFAS enough in the reservoir or in the tributaries that we can't eat the fish. I mean, I think that's an important aspect. And regarding swimming, I think it's probably safe, but we know so little, we seem to know so little about PFAS. And as you can see from this advisory, there's kind of a changing, and we'll talk about the water supply. But I think we are, as local officials, should be concerned about this find and be thinking about ways, or things that we should do to identify the source of this. Is this left over from aggregate, for example? Because some of us remember that whole thing. Or is it something new coming in the tributary? Or is there something we should, so I think we should look at it with the idea that this is something we should try to pursue or get more information on as to why it's happening, why this level is there. We're on this statewide advisory list now, and alphabetically, we're pretty close to the top, which is not a great it's not a great look. So I think we should be concerned about why it's there, what happened to these fish. And I don't know, is the Board of Health involved with this at all, Michael? Have they indicated?
The Board of Health has been reviewing this.
Yes.
So, they have it at their last, yeah,
So I would think, I know I'm concerned about what's going, I'd like to get more information about what's happened there, or, I think, is it left over from Aggregate and Tri-Mount? And those folks are still operating, so, and it is very much a secondary, it's still technically somewhere on the line of the water source, and it was, if you'll recall, we've tested that water and tried to use it as a well site. So, there is some kind of water supply issues here. But to me, it's more overall health and like what's going on. So I think we should be concerned. I'm not sure what our follow-up steps should be. I don't know if the state has indicated any interest, if they're doing anything else besides testing fish, but it'd be nice to know what's going on there.
Yeah, so how about this? I mean, why don't I reach out to DEP and DPH and see if they have any kind of information in terms of their testing protocol, and if they have any theories as to how this came about.
I almost think that, this definitely resides with our Board of Health.
Correct.
And I think it would be helpful for, we're a group of non-scientists here. I think somebody like Raj to come and explain PFAS and explain where it comes from. And maybe it comes from Aggregate, maybe it doesn't, I don't know.
Yeah.
No idea, but, clearly it's such a prevalent chemical in the environment all over.
Correct.
That it's become, and just from the little narrative here, made out of man-made chemicals, manufactured and used in a variety of consumer products and industries worldwide. So what does that tell you of consumer products? We're a consumer society. We're generating this stuff just by general consumption. But, to me, this is stuff that belongs with the Board of Health. And I think they should be engaged on this and really educating the community or expressing whatever concerns may be needed. To me, I think it goes to, I know you're going to go into the second part of this, which is our drinking water supply, which I think is even more critical than whether you swim in the reservoir or you catch fish in the reservoir.
Right.
So I'll segue into that.
Yeah, so, and as you mentioned, that was, that's the second part of this, which the EPA, so not DEP, but the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, has now come out with new limits for certain PFAS chemicals. I believe it's 6. And so you cannot exceed certain limits that they have established now within the water supply. And, I think in your packet, you've got a little bit more detail about what those limits and those guidelines are. So it's going to require communities to test more often, and we currently do test, and we are currently below thresholds. And it requires communities to treat, obviously, and notify and communicate with people what's happening with regards to PFAS in their water. So, again, so far, I mean, we do have very, very small and in many cases undetectable levels of PFAS within our water system. They certainly don't rise to any kind of standard or level here. With these new guidelines, I talked to Doug and our water treatment plant operator, and it's something that we will do more testing on, and we might need to ramp up our filtration system a little bit more. To ensure that it's underneath the guidelines. And in terms of a cost perspective, it shouldn't be that much, maybe changing our filters a little bit more often. But
Do our filter system, is it designed to eliminate PFAS from the supply, or is it just general filtration?
No, it's general filtration, but it filters out a lot of chemicals, not just PFAS, but things that have like a health aspect to it and a health component to it, but then also things like manganese, which doesn't really have a health impact, but it has like an aesthetic value
Taste
to
and
it.
flavor and smell.
And that's really what in terms of our raw water vis-a-vis our finished water, like after it goes through the treatment process, usually the thing that gets filtered out the most is the manganese, because that's what's most prevalent.
So in looking at some of the information, it said that if we do have to increase testing, there's some money, it looks like there's available from the federal government coming down to the state to help us with some of that. Will we, if we need it, will we be able to look at that and try to
Yeah, I mean, we'll look at
access it?
opportunities if that's, if we do incur a significant cost. There is a bunch of money now coming down towards to handle PFAS, both at the state and federal level. So, we'll certainly monitor it, and if it's something that we can take advantage of, we would.
And Rob, it's interesting, you were saying, well, what about aggregate, what about this, what about that? And you look at some of the other bodies of water that are impacted by this, and you think, well, what do they have around them? So it must be more man-made, either coming through the rain or coming through discharge or something, Walden Lake and,
Walden Pond,
Walden Pond. I'm like, Walden Pond has nothing around it but wood, so.
Yeah, Thoreau is turning over.
Running out.
So yeah, I definitely agree, our Board of Health should be working, but I think we should be aware and just whatever we need to do from a drinking water source, I think that would be certainly relevant and pertinent. So thank you.
And Chair, I don't want the folks out there to get worried and nervous
No.
about the fact that, we're talking about water source and drinking water. There's two bodies of water that we're talking about. The body of water that we're most concerned about is, with the fish, is the Ashland Reservoir, which is the Ashland State Park body of water.
Right.
And people need to know that.
And that is not where our water
And that's not
comes
where our
from.
water is
Drinking
coming
water comes
from. It's
from.
not where our drinking water is coming from. However, about 25 years ago, Ashland was looking for another water source, and they did a well. The well failed because of the different chemicals that were found, and that was when aggregate was in full operation.
Correct.
I'm kind of concerned and curious as to whether or not Board of Health can go down there, because that's a deep well check to see if there's PFAS materials in that well. And that's a deep well, and that would be dedicated to that one area. And now that aggregate hasn't been in operation for at least 6 years, I'm kind of curious as to what the levels would be in that well area.
Yep.
But I just want to make sure people realize that that's not our drinking water. Our drinking water is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I think I should impress upon everybody, our drinking water is perfectly safe.
Yeah.
It's tested consistently. It's filtered consistently.
Yep.
and people should not be concerned about that.
Now, should we worry about the issue that's coming off the runoff from the development up there that we've had issues with that, you know, filtering into our
Well,
water area
you know,
and watershed?
I think it's something that we got to keep an eye on, but again, so we're always testing
Yep.
that water for PFAS, and so if if it does become elevated or anything, I think at that point we have to take a look
real
and see,
look at
okay,
that.
what's happening.
Okay.
I think
Thank
it
you.
would be good to get an update, you know, sort of as we figure out what the next steps for us happen to be, whether it's, you know, I think Steve's idea of having Raj come and updating us is a good one, you know. It's probably
Yeah.
gonna take a little while to figure out sort of how this is gonna
Yeah.
shake out, but I think that would be a good
Yep.
idea. And then the one other thing I wanted to just say, the fish flyer that they
Yeah.
sent, can we, send that out in sort of like the communications from the town so we can get the word out?
We actually have.
Oh,
I mean, we've
okay.
sent it out in
Does
the
WACA have it?
newsletter.
Does WACA have it so they can
I
put it
don't
on
know if
there?
WACA has it, but we put it out on social media quite a bit.
Okay.
And this is the flyer that we were talking about right here, folks.
It's posted, yes.
Are we working with the state, with
It's
DCR to get it posted around
posted
the
on site.
reservoir?
Yes.
Especially where people do all the fishing there on the
And in
causeway and
fact,
stuff.
actually, this is.
I was gonna ask.
Yep.
Yeah, hopefully that signage will be more effective than the dog walking signage that's there.
The leash.
Yes, the
Leash your
leash.
dogs, and pick up after your dogs, yeah.
One other question, will this be in another language, potentially?
Good point.
Potentially.
That's a really good
Yeah, I'm
point.
not sure.
It should be.
Not sure. We can certainly check and see if they have this.
They might have it in another language that we
Yeah.
can just get.
Have they already posted it? It's really a DCR thing, right?
DCR and DPH.
Yeah, so it's a state responsibility
Yeah.
at this point, yeah.
But it would be nice to remind them that the folks that are out there fishing and stuff.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, now that the weather's getting nicer,
Yeah.
there's gonna be more people at the state
Yeah.
park, so
And
it's
Pretty nice
good
day on
timing to
Saturday.
get the word out,
Yep.
so before people end up over there.
One other question, in terms of PFAS, how's the MWRA water?
MWRA water is good.
In terms of their PFAS levels or at
Yeah,
or below?
in
Yeah.
PFAS, in terms of PFAS,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting, you know, we're in relatively good shape, but you look at Hopkinton, and not near the reservoir per se, but Hopkinton is having a very tough time with PFAS. They have like
wells.
7 different wells that they utilize, but, I mean, like, from my understanding, like, their fire department would dump, you know, their chemicals, like the firefight, you know, the chemicals that they would use, like, directly into the reservoir at some point, so.
Wow.
Well, I mean, back in the day, everybody was dumping
Oh, that's
everything
true.
Yeah, that's
everywhere.
true.
And, so that's unfortunate, but that's one of the reasons they're looking at connected to the MWRA.
Question, not for this meeting, but because Hopkinton is looking to connect directly to the MWRA, can we look at how that's gonna impact our water draw at all?
We're already
Okay.
looking at that, because we also have an IMA with
Right.
them that will be coming up soon,
Right,
and
that's why,
we need to,
okay.
So
So if we can be kept up to date on where that's at and how it might impact us would be good.
Yeah, because, I mean, the IMA will ultimately need to come before the board,
Right,
so,
okay, thank you.
do that.
Thank you. Unless anybody else has any further questions, we'll moving on in our agenda. The next item is to review the MBTA Community Action Plan. Michael, do you want to?
Yeah, it's just really quick, I think I'm going to cover some ground that we've covered before, but in your packet is a copy of the action plan that was submitted prior to the January 31st deadline associated with the MBTA Community Zoning Plan. And so essentially, if you've had a chance to read it, that action plan details, okay, what have we done so far? It talks about our housing production plan. It looks at the zoning districts within the half-mile radius of our transit station and identifies what those are. I believe there are 5 distinct ones. And then it identifies if we want to move forward with, compliance, which one of these zoning districts would probably be the most effective. And it looks like just from the analysis, the ADDA would be the one that would be most effective. So, I think that's what the action plan is. Ultimately, I think the conversation that we really need to start having is, I think we as a community have a choice that we have to make, whether we want to say, okay, this is the law, this is what the regulations are, and we're going to do what we can to try to meet those regulations and comply with everything as it exists, or do we want to push back on some or all of this?
Right.
And I think so we need to answer that question first, and I don't think it's necessarily a question just for this board. I think,
Right.
It needs to be a larger conversation, and then once we know that, then we could take the
Yeah.
correct course of action.
So, Madam Chair, just quickly, I brought this up at our last meeting, as you recall, and, I think the issue, the reason I brought it up then, the issue had to do with the Attorney General pushing back on communities that were not in compliance, taking legal action against. And, I brought up, certainly brought up the concept of an unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
I brought up the concept that the commuter rail was not expecting ridership to come back to pre-COVID levels at all. I think their calculations are using dramatically decreased ridership. It doesn't take into account the amount of construction and apartment a building that's gone on in our community, let alone any other community.
Right.
I think it puts burdens on the abutting communities as well. And so I think there's lots of issues with this. I agree with Michael. I think, we need to make a decision, but I don't know if we make it isolated. I think we need to look at this in a regional way, because that's the way it's been set up. And, I think Ashland fighting the Attorney General doesn't sound very
Easy?
So are
right?
other towns experiencing the same thought process? And if they are, maybe we should create a collaborative with respect
Well,
to
some
that.
towns
Or is
have-
it already done?
Yeah, so I would also just to kind of take one little step back, because for anyone who isn't super familiar with what the MBTA communities is, it was created in the Baker administration, really to generate more housing. So we saw the Lieutenant Governor this past January and speak, and she said that the state is still 200,000 units short of housing. And so the state is pushing housing, and one of the ways that they're doing that is this MBTA communities law that was signed that requires any community that has any sort of transit system
Or
within
abutting.
or abutting
Right.
to basically comply with new zoning regulations that allow by right density within a certain radius of that, say like our commuter
Station.
rail
So,
station.
isn't it a mile,
Half mile.
And
half mile?
half mile. And they had asked communities for feedback. We had provided feedback to them before the guidelines were issued. And then so they've kind of created this like step-by-step thing that they want compliance from all these communities, or basically they're going to cut off grant
Access to grant funding.
access for those communities that don't comply. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to create all this housing, but we do have to have
And
the
zoning.
understanding that we're creating the zoning that would allow by right housing
Yeah.
for this.
So if you were a property owner, that makes, I think, the development of your property that much more attractive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
So
a-
just because we're not obligated to build it, we're zoning for it,
Right.
and that's a huge thing.
And there's
So,
very
you know,
limited review
That's
and
right.
ability to deny a project.
Yeah.
Right.
But the penalties now have, as the rhetoric around this has
Escalated.
evolved,
Right.
yes, the penalties have escalated. prior to this, we were talking about, okay, if you don't comply, you're not going to be eligible for certain grants, which is important, but it's not everything. But now you have an attorney general who is taking a position that by not complying with the law, you're engaging in housing discrimination. I want to be careful about this. Potentially engaging in discriminatory practices and things of that nature that carry with it significant financial penalties in addition to other consequences as well. So,
But this MBTA communities really gives no leeway to communities that don't have the infrastructure to really support
Correct.
the zoning. So whether it's the schools, whether it's the sewer, whether it's roads, whether it's space, like it really, I mean, I think there are communities that don't have town water and sewer that are supposed to figure this out. Like and I'm sure that there are a lot of communities that are.
And Holliston and Sherborne are two communities that are dealing with that. So it was discussed, Sherborne.
Sure, yeah.
So, Joe, you asked about a regional, and at our last meeting, Michael was like, can you bring it up? So we didn't get to have a Metro West Regional Collaborative meeting in March, but I did talk to our coordinator. So at our next meeting in April, we're going to discuss, is this something, can we bring people together? Because all 9 communities that are part of the Regional Collaborative are impacted by this, either because they have a station or they're adjacent to a community that has. So we are going to look at having a discussion about this because everyone has been impacted and everyone is trying to either get their plan in. And I don't know if all the communities have, but I know a number of them have been working on it. So it's definitely going to be a regional discussion in regards to pushing back and how we can get the state.
Good.
And unfortunately, a lot of the input that was given to the state when they were looking for input last year was not incorporated, right? Some of the things that we talked about was, well, why does it have to be a half a mile? Can it be a little bit further? The fact that they're not allowing for either affordable or senior housing to be included in this,
Yeah.
which makes no sense.
It doesn't. Yeah.
Right? If you're looking for housing, one of our biggest housing issues is affordable housing, workforce housing. So to keep that out of the housing that you're trying to create makes no sense.
How do they keep it out? Like,
It's not a
Because
requirement.
it's not a
It won't be a
requirement.
requirement,
When you
but
create
they're
the
not
zoning
keeping
or
it
you
out.
create the
Yeah.
housing,
Not a
actually, you
requirement.
can't
Right.
designate
Yeah,
it
you
as affordable. You can't impose those limits on
Yeah.
it.
Like the UGC development, right,
Yeah.
right in the rail transit district,
Right.
that we had kind of advocated for, wouldn't qualify for this because it's age restricted, and you
Right.
can't have age restricted housing count towards this,
But the other one.
These units count.
these
Right.
units.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
the other one
The other,
qualified.
Right.
Cirrus would.
but
Serious.
that was already built, so
Right.
they're not even using stuff you've already built.
Well, you
Well, they
can,
will.
you
They
can't,
will.
well, but see, that's through a special permit.
Right,
Now, one of the strategies that I've brought up and we've talked about is some of these things that have been built through a special permit, can you then go back and rezone it
right.
as by right? It's already built, but
Right.
can you do that and go ahead and get credit for it? One thing I do want to clarify is that based on some of the feedback that they have received, they did modify the regulations to where not all of the units had to be within a half-mile radius. So 40% of our land area or units, I can't remember which one, need to be within that half-mile radius. But, and then the other point I want to make is I do agree, this is a regional issue and we need to have a regional discussion about it. But I do think we as a community need to have that discussion and make that
Right.
decision which way we're going to go. So when we do participate in that regional discussion, we kind of have our bearings and know what our position
So
is.
it could be a two-step process. The first process is just where is everybody at? And then each community goes back, has the discussion within their community, and then we come back and determine. And fortunately, we're in the process of getting the comprehensive plan started. I think we can do it as part of that process. Maybe make housing early on in the discussion and get the input from the community as we work on it.
Right. And just, Madam Chair, so there's just a few points I just want to kind of revisit. One, we've all spent years working on our housing production plan, where we've
Yep.
identified housing as important and affordable housing as important. So I think we should remember that as we approach this. And the other thing is that, as we're all aware of, that Ashland has built a lot of housing, has a lot of housing in the pipeline. And when we go regional, and you're looking at places like Sherburne, one of the reasons there's housing shortages is because of towns like Sherburne and not towns like Ashland.
That's right.
So our interests aren't necessarily the same as our neighbors. I think we've built more housing. We have a better record than they do in terms of housing. And I think it would be helpful for me, you know, because we're pushing this inclusionary zoning, which is a density, you know, it's going to result in more density than otherwise would occur, if you know, because that's just the mathematics of it. So we're talking about taking a position in favor of more density. I think it would be helpful to me to understand exactly, and you know, this application starts that process, but you know, exactly what would be the impact, like for example, change our existing zoning. So if we look at, you know, real world examples, like say the land that the church owns, or the industrial area beyond, which I think are all part of that AD, you know, are close enough to qualify, and downtown, which I thought that was a good variance that we asked for, and hopefully that'll still qualify. But, you know, if we look at the real world examples, if we were to change to comply with that zoning, how bad an effect would that have and what we expect to see happen? You know, I kind of missed when we're talking, I missed the required 15 units per acre.
Well, it's like 1,200 units, isn't it?
It's 1143, I believe.
Okay, close enough.
Oh, total.
1124.
But, you know, people are concerned about density and total units. So how bad an impact could it potentially have if we were to do these zoning measures, and where would we have to do it? That would be helpful to me, you know, to get to the point of like, oh, how bad is this? Because we're already talking about housing and affordable housing. So it does make sense that it be around the commuter rail station. There's some logic to that, regardless of ridership. Overall, people who live near it will be riding it. That's why they're living there. So, you know, it'd be helpful to me to know exactly, you know, if those areas, which is only a certain few developable areas, really. It's that land on the south side, really. I mean, Burnham's. I mean, let's talk about what's reality. We've already built apartment buildings that probably exceed those density requirements on the other side. They should qualify, I would think.
agree.
And so if we look at those particular parcels, how bad an impact is it? That would be helpful to me, and I think to the community. Are we talking about crowded apartments there, or potentially, or, you know, what would it be like to comply with this 15 unit per acre?
Is Pete putting together sort of because I know he's identified certain areas, but I assume he's going to identify, okay, you know, this portion of this particular zoning district, or we have to rezone, or do we have to do this for the entire zoning district? Or can we create a smaller, because like, you know, to talk about the total impact, because we may zone for 1,127 or whatever it is, but if we allow by right over a larger part of that, we may end up with 3,000 units.
Yeah, I mean, you could potentially expand it. So my concern here is that level of an analysis, which is important, I think is very resource intensive and very heavy. And I think we need to make a decision more on a principle basis, actually, more than anything, about whether or not we want to expend those resources and go down that road, or do we want to push back based on some of the reasons that have been articulated here, which I think are very valid and very important.
But I think it's, and I don't have any issue with, you know, however that process emanates in terms of the regional concept, but, you know, we've got to acknowledge that, you know, the whole point of this program is to create housing not just around the station, but in other communities that are going to come to the station, that put an additional burden on our infrastructure. And how does that get accommodated other than just classified as another unfunded mandate?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest problem with this is the fact that if you look at the last 10 years, actually, if you look at, you know, even less than 10 years, if you look at the amount of housing that we have created, built, permitted, I mean, is permitted right now but hasn't been constructed, or is in the pipeline. It is a significant amount. It's, again, we went from 6,500 housing units in 2010 to 7,500 housing units in 2020. And since then, we've permitted, I think, almost 500 more, and we've got a couple of other in the pipeline. So I feel like, look, I'm a proponent of housing. I'm a proponent of using housing to revitalize some of our more dilapidated areas, but I do feel like we've done our part.
So how can, I guess the thing is, how can we alter this to be, I still think it's a good concept to use the commuter rail station. That's a solid concept. So how can we turn this into something that's useful, that meets our requirements? I guess that's, or meets our needs. Because I do think it's not a bad idea to have apartments around the commuter rail. And it's up to people like Burnham's or the church or the industrial to decide if they want to develop that way. And if they do, let's make sure it's something that the community is not going to freak out about, that it's going to be something that fits our aesthetic and our density expectations.
But they are going to freak out about it, and what, right or
well,
wrong,
but yeah,
you know.
but I mean, there's a certain level of reasonability to it. Like, it's a good place to build some tasteful apartment buildings, right? Our multifamily housing or condominiums or things like that. I mean, it's not necessarily the end of the world. I'm not suggesting the other side of Pleasant Street, well, those single-family homes, that wouldn't be appropriate. But the other side, I mean, anyway, so that's what I'd like. I think there's something usable here, but if it gets it's too much density, or it's too unreasonable, or you can't make it, then I think that's a different object. But, I think we're almost there in terms of complying and allowing for that kind of.
We have to change our
positive
zoning
housing.
to be compliant. We have to
Yeah.
look at what our zoning is and do by right. I think one thing to look at is, yes, we've been doing a lot of building, but, Southborough hasn't done as much, partly
Exactly.
because of where their station is and what they have. So the idea of a regional discussion, but also I think from the state perspective about looking at not just each community has to do this, but each region, right? We're not the only region that has a rail going through it, right? There's the North Shore, there's the South Shore, there's down into Franklin. So it's one of those times where you want to say to the state, okay, let's look at a region as a whole and how each region is working in regards to building and along their rails versus just one town. And that's a discussion, and to Steve's point, a pushback to the legislature saying, look, can you look at what you're requesting, and can you say, wait a minute, it's like I talk about sometimes with affordable housing. Well, what if we don't have the space for affordable housing, or can we share it in a region rather than each town having to have 10% affordable? What about if your region, you look at a number of communities and you look at the affordable housing available there, but people don't want to talk about looking at things differently. So we have to push them to do that.
Sounds like a topic for the visit from our legislative
Sounds-
delegation.
yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
What timeline do we have before we have to, so we had, part of this action plan was the state deadline of, I think it was what, like
January
January
31st.
31st? So we're compliant up to this point with what they are asking us to do. How much more time, kind of until the next phase of?
End of
Yeah,
2024,
December
right?
31st, 2024 is
Yeah.
when we need to have like the zoning in place and everything. I suggest that we, again, have this conversation as a community, and I'm not necessarily sure exactly what that looks like, but after town meeting, when we have a little bit more time, to set that up and talk about it, because Yolanda, I agree with you 100%. I mean, this stuff should be looked into regionally, but that's not what's in front of us.
Right, no, I agree. I
that's-
mean, it's one of those things where you don't have to go parallel, right? We have to do what we need to do to comply with the state, but at the same time, how can we get them to look at things differently?
But personally, I think it's important to try to get some regional collaboration, but honestly, I think the reality is Ashland is between a rock and a hard place.
on our own
Because
island.
if your expectation is that Sherborne is going to suddenly
Yeah.
increase their housing stock because of this, or Southborough is going to do that, or, even Hopkinton is going to do that, then I think we're living in a fantasy world.
Well, but the other issue with some of those communities, I think about Sherborne and Holliston. Sherborne doesn't have much town sewage and town water. So
Can't do it.
how do you build multifamily housing and increase your density if you don't have town sewer and town water?
There's
Ho-
technology now.
Holliston has similar issues, so
Yeah.
it's, as you said, caught between a rock and a hard place.
Well, one thing, just to, I still think it behooves us to know specifically what our issue is and push for those specific changes. Because I think we're in a better position than many other communities in terms of complying with this.
Well,
Maybe it's just
Right now,
some
we
tweaking.
have complied, so.
So
Can-
I would say, okay, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Madam Chair. Just a quick response to what Rob just said. And I want to piggyback on something that Michael actually stopped. We have 500 units, or 500 new development, buildings, apartment units, or dwelling structures. How close are we to the 10% as a result of that? We're not even close
For affordable.
for affordable.
To get to the 10%, well, I will have to look at that. I mean, obviously, the decision with 501 Pond Street and
Yep.
including that as 25% affordable, so we could count all those units, made a big difference.
I mean, we lost UGC,
UGC for
For
now
now.
is.
but we don't
is
know
off.
how long that's going to take.
And 100
Exactly.
Chestnut Street does not have 25% affordable, correct?
Unfortunately, that only has 10%, so we can only count 18 of those, I believe it's 18 of those units as opposed to the 170
Yeah.
something.
And that's where I'm concerned about. We're looking about, doing rezoning. Well, part of that rezoning should be inclusionary zoning as well. That should be paramount more than anything else.
And that'll come up in the discussion for the comprehensive plan,
And-
right? How, as we're looking at housing and increasing that, how do we put inclusionary zoning in with it?
So we're not gonna be able to solve all this.
No,
No, no,
not-
So
but
I think, I think having a community discussion is a good thing,
So
so let's.
We'll think about that after town
After
meeting
town
and
meeting,
how
yeah,
it
come
how
this
it
summer,
works.
yeah.
Okay.
And then
just to-
also just having something to react to, because if we're gonna have a town discussion about it, we need something visual for people to react to, to
What
say,
does this
okay, what
mean?
does it mean? Because,
What's the potential?
because
impact?
honestly, if you go to the public and say, hey, can we rezone for a lot of density without anything concrete, people will panic.
Mm-hmm.
And people may panic anyway, but, because, I mean, it's a big deal, this is a big deal.
They're already panicking, right? We've already seen when the final regulations came out last year, people saying, commenting on it and being upset with it and
Yeah.
how dare the state direct us and tell us what to do? So it's,
They're going to do it anyway.
And I'll talk to Pete and see what kind of level of analysis that we can do for that, because, I do think it would be helpful.
Particularly with the percentages placed in different areas now.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that,
You know what, what I think we'll probably do is we will probably come up with there's a multitude of scenarios that we
Right.
could utilize.
Yeah.
But we'll probably pick one or two and kind of show, like, this is what what we feel is maybe the best case scenario
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
situation.
yeah, I think that's the way I would approach it, the most advantageous.
Yeah.
ADDA.
Yeah.
But that is so we will need to talk about that forum a little bit later, because
Yeah.
that will be very
Yeah, after
resource
town meeting.
intensive.
Just
Okay.
one other clarification. So, Michael, this, as far as you're concerned, this is something we just filed to maintain compliance. It doesn't commit us to actually doing this, or
No.
we're just considering our options and moving along with the
Absolutely.
process.
All the action plan is saying, okay, what have we done? And of our existing zoning, what would probably be the best one to tweak to be in compliance?
Yeah, okay.
And also what kind of steps that we're taking. And so obviously the comprehensive plan was a big part of that. So, okay.
Okay, so,
Moving on.
in our agenda to some really good news. Good news is good.
Yeah.
The next item is our 2022 Economic Development Bill.
Jeez, we can talk about it.
We haven't talked about it.
We haven't talked about it.
This
And I
is-
noted, I just want to note, it's the MBTA Ashland Commuter Rail Station earmark.
Yeah, that perked
It's
up a few
complicated.
ears.
Yeah, that was concerning, but then, the actual language is down below.
Well, I was going to say,
Yeah, we'll
the
talk. So we want to kind of.
Yeah, so this is something that has been in the works since the Economic Development Bill passed the legislature last fall, but we haven't really been able to talk about it because there needed to be some things ironed out. But, I'm pleased to announce that through Senator Spilka's efforts, we received $8 million in the economic development bill that we can utilize for, and this is the language that was utilized, not less than $8 million shall be expended for planning, design, acquisition, construction, and any other costs associated with improvements to public safety, pedestrian access, utilities, Federal Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, and downtown revitalization efforts in the area impacted by the at-grade commuter rail crossing near the MBTA Ashland commuter rail
There you
station.
go. So there's some positive things.
So it's
Near,
pretty
what's near
broad.
mean?
You know, this, you know, a lot of this was, you know, dedicated to help the downtown project, but obviously it was written broad enough that we could use it for a multitude of different actions. So you have to go through a process, and in order to get this money, a contractual process with A&F. One of the things that we'll need to do is we'll need to come up with a preliminary spending plan for that money and submit that to A&F in order to, you know, in order to get that money, and you have to do a few other paperwork-related things.
So the designing and engineering of the potential sidewalks on 135, is that money, could that money be earmarked for paying that bill, considering that we was talking about development and I think it was plan?
Yeah, I mean, so what's the abstract piece of this is the clause in the area impacted by the at-grade commuter rail crossing. So what is that area? Half a mile radius, 2 mile radius? So I think we have to be careful, but I think it's certainly something that's possible.
Well, I think speaking to the senator in the past, I think it was, or excuse me, the Senate president in the past, the intent was to make it as broad as possible and
Correct.
as flexible as possible. So I would suggest, I mean, you're not going to really get involved with this until there's somebody new sitting here. But I would just encourage, you know, the board to be as creative as possible within that, within those parameters.
Yeah, some of the other parameters I should say is, so this is ARPA money that's coming through the state, and so we do have those types of limitations as well. Specifically, we need to have the plan, you know, finalized by the end of '24, and it needs the money needs to be spent by the end of '26.
So there is a sunset date
Correct.
on this,
Yep.
okay.
By FY '24, so we're talking like next year,
Was it calendar or
No.
fiscal?
fiscal year. 'Cause
I thought it was
it's
calendar.
Obligated by the end of FY '24, yeah.
Okay, so that's presumably the state fiscal year then, okay.
So, Michael, what is the plan? I mean, now that we know the broad scope of what we can use this for, and is the idea that, you know, we'll get together and say, well, we think this, we think that, or are you going to take a look at what we already have in sort of in plan and how we can do with that and then expand on those things?
Yeah, what I was going to do is I was going to, you know, work with our team here and just based on the feedback that, you know, things that we have all talked about and things that have been identified as priorities in the community, come up with a proposal that then we would need to sit down and discuss and revise and go through that. I mean, if you recall when we were doing the funding for the downtown project, we utilized a number of different sources that have more flexibility in them. And so one of the things we might want to do is now shift, you know, basically relieve those funding sources and move it over to this. And so that would free things
Right,
up.
because certainly the undergrounding of the utilities around the track and things in downtown, access from the train station to downtown, some of the trail stuff.
Yeah.
And is there still engineering and costs that we're going to incur from the whole quiet zone potential?
Potentially, but that could be part of the TIP, a revised TIP.
Yeah, because we have money, 1.2?
Well, it's 1.2 right now, but now FRA is talking about just, you know, potentially having to make some more improvements at the Main Street crossing, which could add some more money to it.
But that'll come through the TIP process, right?
Well, that would be
They'll
our
add
hope.
it. Yeah.
That's if they allow quiet zones in the future. There's now talk about banning quiet zones. So
as far as the language here, I guess I would suggest that the board get some clarity on the public safety component. What does that mean? Is it allow for purchase of equipment?
Initially, yes, I would say that would fall into
So
this.
if we need an ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big deal, I think. I mean, $8 million just doesn't come every day, so, you know, I think
have to think.
to thank the Senate President for her efforts here, and I know we'll get a
Absolutely.
chance to do so at our next board
We have
meeting, and,
to think
but this is
strategically
a
about
big, big
how we're gonna
thing,
use
so
this.
it's, yeah.
Yeah,
In
I
the
mean,
process, you know.
I mean, I think, you know, combined, so Senate President Spilka also got us $750,000 in ARPA funds for the Warren Barn, and also $500,000 in ARPA funds for the Riverwalk. So I mean, she's been able to send our way almost 10 million bucks of this. I
You
mean,
know,
that is
it's interesting,
not
Michael, because
insignificant.
gateway cities don't get this kind of money sometimes.
That's
You know?
a fair point.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
So that's the plan for that moving forward. And I'm glad we're able to talk
Are we
about
thinking about public forums or with this, or what's, you gonna put something together, or?
You know, I think let's look at the projects that we already have kind of on the docket, right? And, you know, what we've identified as priorities and what we're working on now and what we said we want to work on in the near future. And let's see what we can, let's see how this funding can help us do those things and complete those things. And then, you know, if we can look at, you know, taking on some other things. Because remember, we got to spend this by 2026.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and the amount of projects that we have on could easily take us into
Sure.
to that.
So you're saying there's more flexible funds that we're gonna use for these other, like downtown?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd be concerned about is, you know, I wouldn't wanna shortchange some of the kind of big picture stuff we could potentially do with this money and use it all up on projects we've already funded, you know, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, it's a zero-sum game. So, like, if we supplant funding that we've already allocated for a certain project, and we decide to, you know, again, use this money in place, it frees up that money for other things. Yeah.
Something else without,
That has
without
more,
a timeframe.
that has more, well, one timeframe and more flexibility, right? This is, we can be creative on this, but there are some limits as to what we can do with this, right? We can't apply this to Route 126
Right.
in any way.
Can't be
But
retroactive.
potentially, we could apply it, you know, being creative to the, you know, if we need to put skin in the game with the old fire station and that parcel.
Potentially. Rob, was there anything in particular?
Well, one thing I just, like, you know, on the Upper Charles Trail, we need to move from the end of Trolley Brook along Park Street to Homer Ave, is it Homer, and then to 135. That was a whole leg to be
Yeah.
looked at as part of this. That's a whole,
So when I talk about projects that we've kind of identified as priorities and are moving forward, I include the Upper Charles Trail as part of that.
Yeah, we finally made it.
shoot.
So,
Well, because that would certainly
Yeah.
be something that would help, right?
Yes.
Is
Oh, it certainly
making that
fits in this.
connection from the Trolley
Yeah.
Brook Trail and to downtown, right?
Yeah,
Especially
it's
as we're working
definitely a
on downtown.
Grade
Wasn't
crossing
part of
issue.
that project, the downtown project, the Homer Ave part of it?
it goes, it extends onto Homer for a little bit, yes.
Another quick question, and, you know, I know we want to finish up relatively early tonight. But and I guess this is for Jen, in terms of the public safety building construction, road construction, do we have all that covered in our budget? So all the road work leading up to the Fountain Street Bridge is accounted for and is part of that?
That's part of a larger project that we're looking at in terms of the bridge itself, also the lights.
Yeah.
And taking ownership of them and potentially replacing them and redoing that intersection with crosswalks. And
Okay, so that'll be, I'm assuming there's going to be some initial road work done because the road right now is in pretty poor condition.
Well, I think
in
they're
that
gonna,
area?
I think they're gonna have to do something before the marathon.
Yeah,
But,
okay.
You know, I'm not expecting to mill and repave that until we get, you know, kind of the the engineering for everything and the,
Sure,
and the
okay,
plan.
yeah, good, all right, thanks.
I'm thinking broadly here, so you may have to move away a bit. But with this money that's available for public safety, how about parking for public safety building?
Potentially, potentially.
You know,
Oh, I know where you're
Parking
going.
for the new public safety?
Any additional parking that would be available?
Why do we need additional parking at the public safety? Wasn't that planned into it?
It was,
Okay.
So, it's a great segue into,
yes.
Yeah, so
Section
as far
E.
as timing goes, like, when do you think you'll be able to kind of have a first pass?
after town meeting.
Oh, definitely.
So, I mean, like, we would talk about it in May.
Okay, okay, that sounds good. And no matter what we end up doing, it's a public discussion that we're having about how we're gonna
Oh,
use
yeah.
these funds. So
Right.
whether we do like a full public forum or if we're.
It's part of one of our meetings, yeah.
Yep, so, but it's really good news, so.
It's, it's
Yeah.
incredible news.
Very nice, and thank, President Spokane for thanking us.
Yeah,
Just we'll keep sharing.
so, okay.
All right, so moving on in our agenda, it's a good segue into discuss topics for the visit from the legislative delegation. So our next meeting, which is going to be April 12th, we have Senate President Spilka and Representative Lewis joining us. And so what they've asked for, and also just, for us to kind of put together an agenda as to what topics and things we want to make sure we talk about with them to make it a good use of their time and also get what we need from it, and also just kind of have a sort of a,
Is this going to be
Contained.
dedicated just to them?
no,
This-
we
it'll
have a
be-
meeting, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking if we were going to
Yeah.
dedicate that time to them.
Yeah, I don't
they
think
would
they're
go.
gonna spend the whole meeting with
No,
us.
that's
I
the
think we'll get
other
'em-
part about having.
How long do we have them? Do we know? How long have they committed to being here? Because
I would say-
apparently she spent a fair amount of time in Holliston, so,
Yeah,
at one of their select board meetings recently.
I think we should plan for, 45 minutes.
Yeah, I would say, we should have a host of questions ready.
Yeah, that's fine.
And probably the thing to do is send them to you in preparation for your next agenda.
Well, that's what we're
meeting.
talking about today, so
Yeah.
that we can send it
Yep.
to them.
Yeah.
Because they've asked for.
Oh, they
for-
want to know beforehand.
They do, they want to be prepared.
Well, they want to be prepared.
I understand.
Yeah,
No ambush.
I like off the cuff.
no way.
Well, I'm sure there'll be
Some
the
of it will be
opportunity for
generated
those.
as we're having
Oh, we
the
can come up with a
conversation.
few.
Understandable.
So obviously, we were talking about the MBTA communities. I think that's on my, top of my list.
Yep.
As an issue.
And the repairs of the station as well. I'd like to know when that
Yes.
process is
Good
going
one,
to
yeah,
get
maybe
started.
they can get an update on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that would be,
the
that would
repairs
be,
of what?
that would be a
Station?
number one
Repairs to
issue.
the station.
Oh, the
Yeah.
train station, yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as you.
Yeah, that's a sore spot with Karen,
Oh, is
as
it?
you know, because we had several meetings with the MBTA, and
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw, the T came out with their 24 through 28 capital plan.
I've not
And so I
seen it.
looked through that, and there wasn't anything specific for Ashland. And I thought it might be lumped into something else. So I reached out to Dennis and asked him about it, and he said, yeah, it would be lumped into with a larger thing, but he said the funds are actually, for our station, are actually in FY '23, so.
Yeah, the maintenance.
Oh, so
They're kinda more like
funding
maintenance.
now? Okay.
So they're supposed to be finishing it
Oh,
by
good.
June?
At least have it under contract.
Okay.
By June.
Did Dennis say that?
Don't know the scope.
Right,
We
so
still
we-
need to get the scope.
Yeah, right,
so.
Right.
yeah. So we're still back at the same place.
Yeah.
That might be, I think it's good to put the repairs on the list, so maybe they'll have somebody on the staff
Well, just,
get
it's
some
just a
hard
reminder,
information.
that's all.
Yeah.
And there's no possibility of them saying, oh, you need to take that 8 million and use part of it to do work on the station or into and out of the station, or?
I think our position is that the T has a robust enough budget, and that
Okay.
is their responsibility.
And their property.
Okay,
Mm.
Property. Yeah, I don't know how we use our funds
Yeah.
to. improve
Yeah.
their
okay,
property.
just,
And I think we talked also about maybe, at one point, we were discussing, using the Framingham model, the MWRTA model for the train station. I think at this point, we need
It's
to
not
back
worth
off of that.
Yeah,
That doesn't,
definitely.
The ridership thing, no.
well, no, taking
no.
over the train station in terms of
No, that's what I
managing the
mean.
parking and all that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of the ridership. Or,
Yes,
Yeah,
because of the
man.
lack of use of the train, of the parking lot.
well, those are still,
Yeah.
I pay,
Yeah.
Pretty
I pay my
fortuitous.
money when I go.
What's that?
Remember how upset we were when that was
I
rejected?
remember.
It turns
Yes.
out it
Yeah.
might have been the.
Yeah, it's not the cash
Blessing
cows
in
that it was back then, I guess.
So would it be worth our while to call Nancy Delahunt, or is she just the representative for the $8 million?
No, she's just, she's the contract
She's
person
that,
at A&S.
she's the
She's not, we
liaison
don't need to
go-to.
talk to her
Okay.
specifically.
The other thing I was thinking of, it might not be a bad idea to reach out to the school committee, because I know with the special education circuit breaker issues that they had this past year, I think they were advocating for,
Increase in special ed
yeah,
education
so,
funding, circuit
so it
breaker
might not be a
funding.
bad idea to kind
That's
of,
a
I was
great
gonna say
suggestion.
to let Lori Tosti, the chair, know.
Shoot, Jim might show up.
Yeah.
Well, he raised that issue that really seemed like something we should lobby about, the increase in the inflation factor for the special
Yeah.
education schools, which seemed to be really kind of a crazy, 15%.
It was-
is
The
really
out-of-district,
Out of
the out-of-district programs.
Yeah, it's really an extraordinary amount and kind of unprecedented. So, I think our position should be, if that's what you want to do, which we understand, this is a funding necessity that the state should take on. And I think that should be a statewide thing. And it's
agree.
certainly something, Randy, I'm glad you mentioned that,
You know,
because that's a
and-
great
yeah.
thing to bring up.
That would definitely be something good to
They
bring up.
would be
Yeah.
interested to know that they're gonna be here to talk,
Yes.
about.
And I'm sure they must have heard about it, so
Yeah.
it must be a huge issue.
No, I know Jim and members of the school committee have been in direct contact with
Yes.
the Senate president about this.
And that bottom line figure is not etched in stone, because anything can happen during the school year. You could have 2 or 3 kids move
Exactly.
Right.
into the community that
Exactly.
need that type of, education, so that skews your budget right out the window for whatever reason, so.
Okay.
We
Is there
did.
anything else that,
I just had, Michael, do you have a list of things that you've put together? Because I know I know you've sent things to Jack, or at least he says you have. Is there a list that you can share with us that we can use that's kind of what I was asking about. Like
A jumping
what's
off
on
point.
your list of things that you think you know?
Well,
should hit
I
that
wanted to touch base about, obviously, MBTA communities. The other thing I really would like to talk to them about is if we don't have, well, even if we do have an answer from the Attorney General on the moratorium, I do want to bring that to their attention.
Sure.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
let us voice our displeasure with that, because I don't want to go down a whole different subject here or spend time on that, but I do think, I think I've expressed this to you, Brandy, if our moratorium is rejected by the Attorney General,
This is the,
The
which one?
the moratorium we passed at
Not the sewer, but the,
building moratorium.
in November, at November town meeting, the Attorney General rejects that, I think that opens up a very large statewide discussion about,
interesting.
Home
about-
rule and
well, yeah,
what towns can do for themselves.
exactly.
Has she given us any explanation as to why she may consider not approving?
I think from the Attorney General's perspective,
Districts housing.
she very supportive of housing and sees it as an equity issue, and from her perspective, a legitimate legal argument to push against moratoriums or things like that. So, like I said, it could be interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm sure you'll talk about that later. Where are we at with the 45 days that we gave the? Attorney
It's coming
General?
up soon. I
Okay.
touched base with Lisa today, so
Okay.
we should find out.
But any other kind of specific funding projects, Michael, that you're in touch with them about, or?
Oh, like the ones that we've talked about and put together?
I think so, yeah. So-
Yeah, so, I mean, it's the things that we've talked about. So we've talked about money for the Economic Development Fund. We've talked about, you're talking about the earmark language.
No, I'm just talking about any other funding requests to our legislators outside of the the $8 million. Are there other things other priorities that you have with Jack or
Yes,
senators?
I mean, yeah, so those are the earmarks, the budgetary earmarks.
Oh, okay.
And
I thought
we
you were
have
talking about
talked
the
about
big
those.
earmark, okay.
So, yeah, so we have, included as some of our requests, money for the Economic Development Incentive Fund that Karen had provided previously, decisions at every turn support, which Karen traditionally does, support for the Upper Charles Trail, including like land acquisition, design, engineering, and professional support. Dog park, did I mention the dog park yet?
We had talked
Sidewalks.
about it, but I didn't know if we went forward with that.
Yeah, sidewalks, because that was brought up at the last meeting, and
What about
Chief
sidewalks?
Rossi.
Because we
included that. That was brought up Joe brought that up at the last meeting and asked
So
that
this
to
is
be included.
in addition to the current, the 135 project,
Correct,
another,
correct.
okay, another
And-
like lump sum, I remember that, yeah.
And then Chief Rossi had requested some funding for computers in the cruisers, so,
And these are all earmarks.
yeah, mark requests.
Update, get newer ones, change the computer itself? Or
Yeah.
just update
I think it's the computer itself and maybe the chassis that it
okay.
utilizes,
Got it.
so. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Rob.
I'd just like to know what what we're requesting, so.
Yep, good.
Okay.
Anything
Moving on.
else, you guys
Yeah,
feel good
I
about
guess if we
that?
come up
Yeah.
with something else, we can send it in and.
Yeah.
Keep the truck rolling.
So you'll take in requests for topics, and then you can decide if they're worthy or not. Topics for discussion with the,
Oh, I'm gonna send them
legislative
all these. I'm gonna.
yeah,
so
but
I'm
if we
gonna-
have some additional, we can send to you?
Yeah,
okay.
so we're in
All
contact
time.
with,
Yeah.
Karen Edelman Foster.
So we can shoot
Okay.
those off to you?
Yes.
Okay. And if by chance, like the day off, we may come up with another one, we can just.
Sure.
Well, I'm
I'm
sure
sure
there's
they
gonna be
can.
we're gonna have conversations.
Right, and as we're having a conversation, something else may come
come
up,
up,
as long
right.
as it's not
Okay.
out of the blue. They typically like to know what we're gonna be asking them about, no out-of-the-blue questions.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last thing under old new business is discuss annual town meeting warrant. Jen,
They give
are
that to
you up?
Jen, yeah.
So far on the warrant, you have a draft, an early draft, in the backup. There's 14 articles, starting with, town reports, which is usually how we start our annual town meeting, and then we'll move to the budget. Intentionally we put all the budget articles up front. So, the annual budget, the transfer to the OPEB trust, which we do every year, transfer from, the sped stabilization to the general fund. Then our consent articles, so we have our typical consent article that goes through those sort of 6 broad categories, and then we'll move on to the CPC, I believe, sorry, this one's longer. The CPC consent article that talks about their current balances and their, the previously bonded projects. They have CPC has made a recommendation for one project, and it's $175,000 to restore the fire association. It used to be the fire departments, but the fire association owns it now. I believe it's a 47 truck that was previously used in parades and other community events. So they're gonna work to revitalize that.
Did
I
you
have
say $147,000?
$175,000 for a 1947 truck
Vehicle.
that has fallen into
And we haven't
disrepair.
talked about that previously, but it's been with the CPC. That's
It
the
has been in
deal.
front of the CPC. They voted to approve that. I have a placeholder here for the possible lease of the fire station. So those RFPs are due tomorrow. We have compiled a group, and we will hopefully be meeting next week, and then hopefully coming to the select board at our next
on the
meeting.
12th.
Yeah.
How many have you gotten so far?
None, but we don't usually get them
Oh.
until the day of.
Oh,
They
okay,
usually
okay.
come in, 10 minutes before
Okay.
11. Yeah, we received questions from at least one proposer, several questions, so I'm optimistic that we'll at least
Get
get one. So hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed there.
And we put in the language that if something appropriate doesn't come forward, we don't have to make a decision,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think we talked about this previously, but this was, Keep Tech had made the, had asked us to put on an article about establishing a capital stabilization account for Keith Tech. We did receive one citizen's petition.
Can you go back? Have they told us a number that they want for the capital?
No, this is just the ability to establish
okay.
it.
Okay.
Okay.
So is that a placeholder that you're leaving it that with as well, or no?
No, that's a real warrant.
No, that's a real art, yeah, so they
Okay.
need the they need authority to establish
Gotcha.
it. Sounds like step one of a multi.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Okay.
A citizen's petition, so we did receive one, it's pretty specific, and pretty straightforward. It's just to, create a bylaw that talks about the speaking time at town meeting, so, I think we've been utilizing, I think it's 90 seconds, if I
It
remember
is.
correctly.
It has been
And so this
90
is just to
seconds.
increase it to 3 minutes, which seems,
Okay.
I mean, I can't
Yes,
imagine it
seems
doesn't
reasonable.
pass, yeah, it
Yeah.
seems
That
totally
seems very
reasonable.
reasonable.
Yeah. It depends on who's speaking, though, of course.
Will you get 3 minutes to talk about it? Oh, no.
No, just one,
Get
probably,
90.
yeah.
90 seconds.
opinion.
90 seconds.
I think the town moderator should have discretion to, if you remember the Gong Show.
This is another one that I'm working with Lisa, so I don't have any language just yet. But a placeholder to remove the police department from civil service, so they're sort of working through that process.
Oh,
But
interesting.
And the police department is supportive of this and.
yeah, so they're waiting. Yeah, so I think Michael and Catherine have been working through that process. So in case we're able to do that at this
Okay.
one, otherwise I think we could obviously defer if we needed to.
Yep.
Funding for inflow and infiltration. So this is a pretty standard one. Typically, this is on November. Doug had asked me to put it on
Yeah.
for the annual, as they're working through those projects. And then the last two are the sustainability articles that we received a brief summary on.
Oh, yeah, from
So
Nash, yeah.
accepting the specialized stretch code, as well as the last one is the net zero emissions for any projects on town buildings.
Municipal
Yeah,
buildings.
municipal,
Moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
And that's really what I have for
Great.
now, so.
Good.
Okay.
Now, that's for future buildings, right, and not current?
Yes.
Future.
Yeah, or renovations to current
think they said
buildings, yeah.
substantial renovations.
Substantial
yeah.
renovations, okay.
Yeah.
So just talking through the logistics of town meeting, are we offering childcare for anybody?
We are.
We are, okay.
Mhm. So I'm trying to get confirmation on sort of, who is doing that, but Kelly Rund, our recreation director, is looking for people to make sure that we can have it. We're gonna try to make that standard so that we always have it.
Okay.
Even if typically it's only 1 or 2 people, but I think it helps just to have that as an
And
option.
have we made any decision that we're gonna meet before the meeting?
We'll probably, I would think
We usually post
Typically
it.
We post
post.
it, right, but are we gonna do that again?
Yeah, and ideally, we close the warrant at our next meeting,
Yeah.
just so that we can update it.
I'm not gonna
I mean, just
disclose
so I
at this
can
time.
post it and
Yep.
enough time.
I'm focusing on town.
So we will, so we'll plan to close and post we'll put it on our next.
At the
meeting.
12th?
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
what I'm hoping for.
April 12th, right?
If we, what's the timing that you have to have it? Because we're gonna probably.
2 weeks.
We'll meet 2 weeks after that on the 26th, even though we had said.
Yeah,
we
it's
were
usually,
gonna-
I think for annual, I have to look, it's either 7 or 14 days, but I believe it's 7 for the annual
24th.
town meeting. We try to do it at least 2 weeks.
Yeah, let's,
So the 12th
Yeah, I
is
think we
usually-
should plan on doing it on the 12th.
yeah.
That way people know what the warrant is and,
Yep.
because if we wait until the 26th to finalize it, that's
Yeah,
1 week
yeah, I
before
don't
town
think-
meeting.
I don't think we
That-
meet the-
That's not appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
If we
don't
can do
think
it on
we-
the 12th, let's do that.
Yeah, that's the plan.
and nothing has to go in front of the planning board for any.
Yeah, there's no zoning for this town meeting.
And by that time, town council will have the opportunity to read through all the
Yes, we're
warrant
meeting on
articles.
the 12th.
Yeah, she's read through most of them now, we're just working on some language, so I expect a few
Okay,
tweaks, yeah.
so there'll be some minor tweaks. Okay, but nothing major.
No, unless we add some language
Right.
in for the civil service or for the,
Okay.
yep.
All right, great, thank you.
Perfect time.
Yep, good timing is right. So moving on to our consent agenda,
You're right.
could I get a motion?
I
unless-
move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Our consent agenda is passed.
Thank you to you, Brandy and Susan, for getting those older board meetings updated and done.
We were trying to pull some joint meetings, because the joint meetings are always the tough
Yep.
ones.
They
So,
are.
and Steve had taken some meeting minutes that we passed at our last meeting, so we're getting things
We're getting
cleaned
up to date.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yep.
So, and then also, we've shipped a bunch of them off to the planning board too. So
Good.
I had seen Tricia on the Zoom, but so she's aware of those as well. So, so moving on to priority project update, Michael.
Sure. I'll be relatively brief here. Downtown, we really don't have too much to report, except, the weather's warming up, so we'll probably start seeing crews from Gioso working on that stretch between Front Street and Homer and Summer soon. Again, doing the granite, we'll be doing the medians and paving. Public safety
A
bill.
quick question on
Yeah.
the median strip in front of Lunkers. Is that going to be kind of a uniform, condensed?
Yeah, it's going to be narrowed.
Yeah.
And actually what it's going to be is stamped asphalt that looks like granite.
Okay.
So it will be narrowed a bit. And then we're still deciding on the treatment on the end, whether we want to have a D-stone and have the crosswalk go through it, or just have it,
Okay.
have the crosswalk there.
And will that be the same idea in front of Johnstone's as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that just, Michael, that's stamped asphalt, like painted to be like brick? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they use a pattern
Yeah,
and
I'm
color
just-
fast type
Be
of.
careful, because I see it in Worcester, and it doesn't last all that well in traffic. Tends to come up and create, so hopefully they've improved it
Got $8
since.
million, so maybe we'll just
Yeah.
upgrade to the granite cobbles.
But-
No.
So, but, it's probably, it sounds like it looks good, but it seems a little
Well,
weak.
we
at
want it
least
to
the stuff I
last,
saw.
for
Yeah,
sure,
Yeah.
yeah. So, there's that. Public safety building, JB, I think if you talk about the new building and then just kind of an update on the old police and fire station.
Just did.
Yeah, we just did a quick overview as
okay,
part of the
never
warrant
mind.
article for the fire,
I should
for
leave
the
more
fire
often.
station.
So,
I don't have too much in terms of the new public safety building, sort of working on some final things in the apparatus bay, and then the fire department will begin to move in, so probably in the next several weeks. And then we'll work to they'll switch out after the new correct doors, which will happen once they move in several months. They're sort of still working through that approval process, and we have a committee meeting tomorrow where we'll sort of give updates on where we are, hopefully talk about potential dedication.
Yep.
Yeah,
2
that'd be
o'clock.
good.
Yeah, 2:00 tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah.
Dedication / open house. I know people have been anxiously awaiting
Yeah.
to see the building, and so, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Actually, the Chief Rossi was at the most recent Lions dinner meeting, and she was the invited guest speaker, and she made an offer to everybody there. If you're interested in an a tour, communicate with her, reach out, and
Nice.
she'll be glad to give those folks a tour. So I'm not suggesting that they get
The entire
inundated
town call her?
with
Yeah.
requests, but, I think there's a lot of folks that would love to see the building and,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
yep.
Just hit me now. Hit me now.
So, okay, public safety building. I don't think too much more on the Mendez School. Looks like the plaque is getting all settled out, and that's good. Looking forward to getting that project completed. But that's been. I hope to meet with Paul and Jim and the project manager soon, just to talk a little bit about financing in this last bit of money that we have to permanently bond. And so that way we can figure out the tax impact a little bit with more detail. Valentine project, they have completed the basement and the getting that poured and completed, and that so far is still on time and on budget. They should be putting on the roof pretty soon, and then they'll start working on everything else. We had a very good meeting with a potential holder for CR last week?
Last week.
And very, very productive and very, very encouraging. So Carl has actually offered to take on the task of drafting an original, or do the
First
first
pass,
draft of the CR.
yep.
And Yeah, moving
Very
that
good,
forward.
super.
Very nice.
So,
Yeah.
and then Warren District, I really, not too much, except Historical Commission is still working on the kiosk. They're doing a lot of work trying to make sure that they get it right
Wow,
and
that's
everything.
great.
So Joan and Helen have really taken the lead on that and done a lot of work. I do see a for sale sign
was
in
gonna
front of it.
mention
What?
The Hall House is for sale.
So it's not on the market yet. But
Did we
You
know? Didn't he
Yeah.
say that he might live there and?
I think that was all of our impression. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I said to Michael, I said, we need to make sure we bring Mr. Gustafson back.
But wasn't
front
that
of us
always
to tie
part of
it.
the deal? A sale?
Well, it's his property. He
Yeah.
can. He can.
Yeah,
do,
so that was always part of the deal.
Remember, you guys didn't want to do the walk-in tours or the house tours.
I did.
He was
I
gonna
did.
do
I
an
know,
open
Rob. You
house
and I
for
were on
us,
an
though.
island.
Right, he was gonna do,
So
something
maybe
I
now
brought
the
up
open,
that,
the open house might be with a bunch of potential buyers.
That's true. That's what he was thinking the whole time. Sure, we'll invite everybody up. Yeah.
But yeah, I think we should probably just make sure Mr. Gustafson comes before us just to tie up any.
because
any
there's
loose
still,
ends.
there's still
I know.
restrictions on
Yeah,
that
there will
property,
be
right? I mean, like,
restrictions.
And they do pass to the new owner.
Yeah.
right,
I
so,
am disappointed, I have to say, like,
Why, what would you have
I don't
preferred?
know, like, it just, I don't know, I would have, I had hopes that he was going to embrace that
Yeah,
house
yeah,
and live
yeah.
in that house, because that was what he was, that was,
was the impression.
that was the impression that we
Yeah.
got. And so, for him to turn around and flip
Yeah.
it, like.
On the other hand, you sell it to a
But you know
developer.
what, though? Yep, exactly. And
Right.
he restored it. It is beautiful.
Yeah.
Right, it's
Like,
certainly a much better
it's-
state than it was.
I would hope that he would invite the board to come and tour the house when it's.
I give you guys a discount.
But, I think from my perspective, that was always part of the deal, that, he was buying a property. It came with conditions that had to be carried on, and that's what he's doing.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it was an experiment, for lack of a better, this whole process. I don't think this town has ever bought a historical property before and tried to do this. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think the town has ever bought a historical property and tried to restore it. We learned a lot through this process, and I don't think it's I think it's something that if the opportunity comes up, we can look at doing it again as potentially a solution to things. But obviously, we've learned a lot through this
Sure.
process
Yeah.
and know what.
Yeah.
do
Wouldn't the
different.
Valentine property fall into that category?
Well, Valentine, we can't sell, so.
No,
We're learning a lot of lessons from that one too.
Yeah.
So I mean, don't get me wrong.
Well, I think Paul probably learned a lot of lessons as well,
He probably did.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
So anyway, so there's that one. You want me to just
Yep,
segue?
you just keep on going, town manager report.
So one thing that's not on the list, but came to my attention today, so they are going to do a little bit of blasting on the 126 project. And so they wanted to start next week. I said, no, that's not going to happen. So I said, you've got to give residents at least a couple weeks' notice. And so
Where is the blasting gonna be,
it's going to be near Spyglass, that area.
by the Rotary?
Near it.
before.
A little bit before, but
Okay.
yeah, not like on the other side of town. So
Which during the whole process of the planning,
They knew that was gonna happen.
well, it was one of those things they were going back and forth. They were hoping they could just drill it. So this is the first I've heard, but that they
Yeah.
actually need to, again. So as you're coming from Holliston into that hill,
Yeah.
you'll have to do some
Yeah.
stuff, it
Okay.
sounds.
So April 17th is when they agreed to do it, and not on the marathon day. They're not doing it
So
on marathon day.
on Tuesday,
Correct. So
And they're gonna notify, they're gonna do the.
they're going to
notifications.
notify the residents and the
Okay.
abutters.
And the fire department will be there, I would assume.
Yeah, so the fire chief has to sign off on it. Keith has required a fire detail,
okay.
and a few other things that, make him feel comfortable. Also on here is an EPA press conference. So we talked a little bit before about the fact that through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the funding had been made available to do the final remedy associated with the Nyanza groundwater cleanup. So EPA is actually going to have a press conference about it on Monday at 10 a.m. at Mill Pond Park. And obviously, you know, the board's invited to attend. I'll extend something to the Board of Health as well. It's coming Monday. So I do believe Congressman McGovern will be, is scheduled to be there. Who knows if he'll make it, but.
Is this gonna be outside at the park? Just
Yeah.
like in the parking lot or something?
No, at the park itself. If it does rain, we will have it here on the second floor. So,
That's interesting.
but again, hopefully you can make it.
Michael, speaking of Mill Pond Park, what's the timeline for the renovation work there?
I have to go with Doug and Doug next week to look at some things and approve some final pieces of it.
Yeah.
And then I can get a better estimate.
Okay.
Of how
Are we
long it's
gonna keep
take.
that sluiceway visible?
So the hope.
Because that's cool.
Yeah, so the hope, what we're trying to do is create that walkway, but still keep the granite walls exposed as kind of the border, and then basically we'll be putting in it's really
Because I
pea
saw that it's
gravel.
filled in now. There's stuff in the
Yeah,
sluiceway.
and so that's to support the walls to
Okay.
keep them from falling in, and then we'll use like a pea stone with some interlocking tiles, which will make it ADA accessible.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, you'll see the granite, the old granite.
Yeah, nice.
For the
Very
pillars and
cool.
everything. Yeah, it's cool.
Good.
Cool.
Okay.
Let's see, letter, RE route parity for the Upper Charles Trail. Just wanted to let you know, Joel had brought this to my attention. Hopkinton had sent a similar letter, just basically putting our legislative delegation on notice that, hey, you know, if you do help with the purchase of the CSX property, you know, please keep in mind route parity and making sure that that is maintained through the
Yeah,
process.
thanks for writing that, Michael. And
Sure.
Everybody who got involved in that issue.
Received word from Sarkey yesterday in Framingham. So they had received $250,000 in CPA funds for the acquisition of the Zani property.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to talk about jointly putting in an application for the rest of the funds.
Perfect.
So,
Nice.
Starbucks update. So a couple of things related to this. So obviously it's, we're very, very pleased that Starbucks was approved, finally approved, and it had to go through an appeal process, but all of that got resolved. One of the things that has come up that was a condition in the planning board's decision is a mural on the east side of the wall. Great idea, great concept. Wish we would probably had been consulted a little bit more because I don't know how we can do it. So the owner is only giving $500 towards the mural. And we can't use public funds to improve private property unless we go through the incentive program, but that has a matching component to it. So it's not like $1,000.
Or we go through CPA, because we've done that with CPA funds.
So
Not
through
on private.
Not on private.
But wouldn't we
Telecron,
fundraise?
the
wouldn't we-
clocks, the sign,
For where?
Well, the sign was not CPA, but the clocks,
the clocks, the
that's historic.
Yeah.
Okay, but it.
But
it-
what bucket would this CPA? It's
Yeah.
not, it's a
No,
new building.
it's not historical.
Yeah.
General,
You gotta find it under, it's gotta be open space, affordable housing,
How much-
historical.
How much do we think something like this would cost? Do we have any idea?
it depends on the artist, it depends on what you decide, and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, or can we, if Starbucks is only given $500, can we go back to the planning board and say, do we really need to move forward with this?
Well, I think that's a good point. I think they should take ownership of this. You know, I think, again, I think it's a great idea. I think I mentioned at a prior meeting about, if you remember Colella's Market in Hopkinton, their entranceway had a beautiful mural of marathon-related motif. And, you know, so to have something that's marathon related on Starbucks,
Yeah.
great idea.
Yeah.
you know, the problem is, how do you implement it? It's a private building, a private owner, how do you maintain it? What if it gets defaced, who's responsible for it? There's a lot of conundrums here. And I think the planning board really should take ownership and kind of, you know, lay out that process, lay out those concerns, and then, you know, bring it back to, you know, and then come up with a plan as to how it could be implemented. You know, realizing that we can't use public resources for this project, you know?
Has anybody contacted?
And I think it's possible to do that, but it has to be done, I think, privately, in a sense.
Yeah. So I guess, I'm sorry, Joe, you were going to say.
That's okay. Has anybody contacted Billy Goldberg to see who the individual was that did the mural on the side of his building?
No, not yet. I'm actually going to meet with the chair of the Cultural Council tomorrow, and, you know, I think it would be great if they were involved in the process of selecting an artist, so, you know.
So I think, to go to Steve's point, or it sounds like, Michael, you've taken on at least some of this process and looking at it. So I think, yeah, the planning board started this process, but I think, and they should probably continue to be involved, but I think, you know, it's all right for us as the town leaders to kind of say, well, this is a good project, maybe we'll help get it going or help figure out how to do it. So I'm, you know, and I'm willing to kind of stay involved in that with my limited expertise as a volunteer. But so I'd like to support them in this, and to go to your point that I think it could be quite an extraordinary thing. And, you know, if there are barriers to public funding, then I think we should be able to I think we could raise funds. And again, how much, I don't know, but it's not a huge.
I don't think you'll have an issue raising funds.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the issue is that you're gonna have to do this as private citizens, in a sense.
I'm not sure. Well, we clearly must have some sort of access, and I haven't read the language in what the planning board negotiated.
It's very bare.
But, so that leaves us they're going to, Starbucks presumably has to allow access and will support.
Which is part of the decision.
Yeah.
Yes, so they allowed doing that. But again, the next part wasn't thought through, which was how do you actually make this happen?
So
Certain
I have
kind
to
of
admit,
access.
I have not watched the specific decisions on the planning board and Starbucks. When you say the east side, where is that on the building?
Yeah, that's how they refer to it. So I think.
Like,
It's facing Union Street.
Yes.
As the runners come from Hopkinton, they'll
Yeah,
see
it's
this, right?
facing the
Facing-
Cherry Street.
It could be an extraordinary
intersection.
Well, I don't
thing.
think it's facing the Cherry Street. I think it's
Well,
facing.
no,
think it's
one-
facing the other way
way the
around.
building is oriented, but it's that,
But it's heading towards Hopkinton, it's facing towards Hopkinton.
facing towards Hopkinton, yeah.
So it's really
Yeah.
kind of an
Yeah, it
extraordinary
could be a very
gateway.
cool
Yeah.
thing.
It could
Yeah.
be.
Again, I think it's the process and the
Yeah.
implementation that needs to be,
facing
I think it's
the
great
regulated
that you're
process
willing to
from
get
the
involved with
Yeah,
that, so,
cultural council,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
so
I
I'll
think
talk
that's
with
good.
them.
And to Joe's, I mean, there's a ton of local artists. I mean, you know, you probably know, do you know the Rossolis? You remember them? They're
yeah.
fan- Louis Rossoli's a successful artist. He lives here in
My
Ashland.
cousin.
Yeah, so there's,
Course.
you know, he just won. Of course, everybody's
course.
Joe's cousin. He's actually my wife.
Why did we not think that?
He's actually related to my wife as well. I would- Anyway.
So does that make you two related
yeah,
by
no.
marriage?
No,
No,
you were
way.
quick to say that, no.
I'm married, not, you know. Anyway, but, you know, there's other artists we all know. We've got some great local talent.
It's
here.
not, the
I don't
problem
think
is not
it's- yeah, I
finding the
don't- I don't
artist.
think that's the
That's the
problem.
It's
easy
the
part.
funding,
It's
the funding, that's the
It's the
problem.
process.
It's
Yeah.
the
It's the
process
process.
that it was written into the decision of the planning
Yeah.
board. So
Yeah.
now we have to figure out how to implement that
Yeah.
decision.
Now it's on us to
So
But it's
figure
private
All right,
property,
Mike, that's
so
the-
it's.
I move,
Now it's
I'll
on
make
us
a
to
motion that
bail
we
it out.
appoint Rob as the board liaison
liaison.
to
Wait a
the
minute.
mural
I have to,
project.
wait a minute, I have to go refill my water. Is it? Yeah.
that'll make it that much easier to vote, because you won't make a decision.
You know, once you're not there.
Well, all right, if you want to make me, I'll
But,
accept
you know,
that if you think that's.
Yeah, I don't
And
think
I'll
we
talk
have
to
do that.
Isabel
No, I don't think
tomorrow
so.
and
Yeah.
we'll see.
But, you know, the other thing
Yeah.
about the Starbucks decision, and I think as a board, I think we should acknowledge our participation in taking that project over the finish line. And, you know, that we
No
were.
pun intended.
Well, that's right. And, you know, the fact that we were able to assist and collaborate with the planning board in a difficult situation, and we were able to resolve it in an amicable way. And, you know, I think that's how collaborations should work. I mean, despite the fact that we had to go through a legal process to get there.
Right, and I think the planning board is learning all this stuff too. I think they had good intentions. It's just that,
I mean, if you,
it's a little outside the scope of what they would typically do for site plan review, and so therefore it's.
I mean, think about our planning board. None of them have been there for a full term yet.
No, Tricia's the closest, and she's up, I think, next year.
So,
Yeah.
and I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot to learn as you step into that position.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
An awful lot going on, too.
So more to
Great.
come, so
Yeah.
Great,
you'll come
Michael.
back to us with an update, and then Rob will take it over.
Sure.
Yeah, I do, just to piggyback on Steve's thing, I do think we need to acknowledge the staff, especially Beth and Peter.
Oh, yeah.
So Starbucks was going to walk several times during this process, and it was through a lot of conversation and time and spent to keep them engaged in the process and to see it through. So,
And
you know,
whether you
that's a lot
like,
of work that doesn't get seen.
and whether you like their coffee or not, to have someone like Starbucks in our community is a positive.
It's a big deal.
It'll
Starbucks
keep
effect.
people,
What's their
it'll
union
keep
rep?
people from going to
You're talking about the guy who's now
Hopkinton and
being-
Southborough and Framingham and Milford.
Oh, it's a
Alright.
it's a good thing. It's definitely
All
a
right,
good thing.
you are
So-
talking about
help-
the guy
will
who's,
help
as
Beth's
we
budget.
speak, is in front of Congress explaining his labor practices.
So,
Anyway.
so why don't we move on to the comprehensive plan update?
Okay, so comp plan, so the first part is that we are moving forward with our process to assemble a steering committee. We had over 50 applications for precinct representatives. In turn, we have sent those precinct representatives 5 questions to answer by Friday at 5 p.m. And from that point, we will start our selection process, which is multiple layers. So hopefully we will have that resolved soon. The RFP, Jen, I know I just asked you about it today. It's due the 13th,
Good job.
April 13th, so that date is coming up on us too. So that's, we have not gotten as many responses to the questions as we did have initial interest, so.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's good.
Well, to Jen's point, we'll get them all on Friday before 5 o'clock.
Could you send out one more reminder, like say tomorrow, just because like one last
Well,
Yeah.
you sent one today, right? Wasn't there
Monday?
one?
It was Monday.
Sent one Monday.
Oh, okay.
You wouldn't consider extending it if you felt that be desirable?
So, I mean, if we don't get, we've gotten enough, I think.
From
To
every,
be
each
able-
precinct?
There's
And
one.
is
Ish.
Susan pulling those together? I mean, I've been seeing them come through, some of them, but is
We'll
there
have
going to
to-
be a
we-
compilation put together for,
I don't think we talked about a process for that, did we?
just that we all have to read through them
I
all?
think we have to read through them all and then come up with the 3 candidates from each precinct that we
Right, that we want to interview.
I'm keeping like a literal checklist of people who
Whoever's
have
As they come in?
responded.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're tracking what has come in.
I am. We have had 2 people, I should have said this, 2 people withdraw.
Oh,
or,
okay.
Decided that they didn't,
They really didn't want to do it?
yeah.
And I
Makes
would say
sense.
for everybody that had expressed an interest and sent in a talent bank form, we do want you to be a part of this process. So
And stay involved.
I know it seems like it may seem overwhelming that there's all these people and it's a huge process, but it really isn't. We're really looking to just kind of get a good sense of who people are so that we can put together a really good steering committee. So, but we want everybody involved. So please, 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 send back your responses so we
Well,
can.
especially since a lot of the names that came through were not familiar to me. I mean, depending on where, your demographics and where you are and who you interact with, there were a lot of names and people who were new to me. So it's important that they respond with the questions so we get a better understanding of who they are.
Yeah. And my priority has always been trying to get new people.
Right. I think we've all said that.
To be representative of these
Of the-
precincts.
right, that's the idea.
because We are going to have folks from the boards and committees.
Already,
as
right.
As
Yep.
selected and appointed, and, those folks have been involved in quite a bit in town and are names that are familiar to all of us.
Yep.
But we want some new voices, we want some new perspectives, and also just to get new people engaged in helping,
Yep.
helping our community. So, so we're looking forward to meeting everyone during the
Good.
interview process.
Good, well, good luck.
And then I have 2 other things, not that I have it written down. So first of all, we've all seen some emails the past couple of days about Whittemore Drive and Burnham Circle. So, just to let you know, their concerns are legitimate. I think we share those concerns. So I've spoken to a couple of the residents and let them know that it's our intention to make sure when the stormwater system is handed over to the homeowners association, it's built correctly and in proper working order, and doing what we need to do to make sure.
That was a good
Yeah.
response that you
Just to
said, thank you.
piggyback on that, actually, Joe and I were there this afternoon to just get a sense of, Joe drives by there all the time on his way
Oh,
home.
yeah, he
but
lives there.
I haven't been on Burnham Circle ever, and it
new,
needs a
right?
ton of work.
He's got cousins there, so. That's all right.
Actually, I do.
But, it was last week's planning board meeting. I watched just the very beginning of it. They met with the Conservation Commission, and they had invited the Concom to come and just to have a kind of a general discussion. I thought it was really good. I think they asked a lot of good questions. There was some good dialogue back and forth. But, I think it goes to these kinds of conversations that should be done as these projects are getting developed and getting permitted and so on. And again, this goes back to, one of my broken record themes is, we work in silos, and we don't have this cross-pollination of committees. And I think, this project on Whittemore, and I can't speak to what happened back in whenever it was started, but if there was some more collaboration between these two boards, maybe some of this stuff would have been resolved. I don't know. I'm not suggesting that. I don't have all that information, but I thought it was good that there was this attempt to communicate together. So.
And a lot of time had gone by, too, with respect to that. There was, several developers that,
Well, remember Whittemore was built in
the first six,
2016.
right, that was the first phase,
And
correct.
Burnham Circle, those have just been built. but,
Right.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
tough spot.
So-
But, so is that, and then the last one, and I know, the board members will want to speak to it, but, we just have to acknowledge the passing of Izzy Masenko. And,
Oh, I hadn't heard.
yesterday. And, a few weeks ago, he had taken ill, and he'd kind of gone through a tough path, and just really kind of seemed to take a turn for the worse recently. But Izzy needs no description. Everybody knows him. Everybody loves him.
I actually wrote up something, so.
Yeah, I was surprised that he.
I did not know you didn't know. I'm sorry.
I saw some stuff.
Yeah, he served on the Council on Aging for 17 years, the Board of Registrars for 24 years. He's on the Democratic Town Committee for 31 years. He was on the Police Chief Selection Committee recently, and was very, very proud of that and the work that he did. He was also named Citizen of the Year in 2013, which is well-deserved. So, condolences out to Maureen and his family, and it's a tough one. So, for sure. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Moving on to board reports.
Sure.
Joe, you want to start?
Real quick. I had the pleasure of joining Paul Kendall and several others for a tour of the New Mendez School construction site, and I was extremely impressed with the building. Claudia was there with us for the walkthrough, and well-designed, well thought of, and I did suggest that there are federal funds available for special security programs for schools, free of charge. Whatever funding is needed for equipment and/or design. So I sent that, discussed that with Paul. So whether he may look into it, hopefully he does, because any monies to add additional security measures is very helpful, considering that we've had additional, shootings again over the last 2 weeks. It's just, the madness has to stop. I'm just, enough already. It bothers me deeply that innocent people and children lose their lives because of, folks that have weapons and have mental health issues. So it's just not the guns, it's also those that have some mental health issues. So those both need to be done. Okay, I'm off my bandwagon on that. Traffic Study Committee, we met on the 21st. We discussed in length sidewalks along 135 from the community center down to the middle school. I won't expound that any further. With respect to that, we're also looking into changing the traffic pattern design going into the Warren School from Elliott Street, and hopefully and trying to make an additional storage lane for the vehicles out back to help alleviate the traffic that's waiting up on Elliott Street. And once the move is made with the fire station going over to the new building, we will consider making that a three-way stop at the intersection of Elliott Street and Fruit Street. So hopefully that'll help minimize the speed on coming down on Elliott to that area as well. Public Safety Building, moving along greatly. We already had the discussion, so I'll let it go. I just want to thank everybody that was involved in the AEFI Casino night. It was a lot of fun. I wish it was real because I would have won some serious money. Thanks to my wife, but anyway, it was a lot of fun, and thanks to those who put their time and effort into it. I want to expound on what Michael said about Izzy. We lost a giant of a citizen, without a doubt. Passed last night. His family was holding a vigil for him at his bedside. He was ill, and it got worse over the years. One of the things I will always remember about Izzy was his huge smile. And he had an infectious laugh. If you knew Izzy, you knew that he was a man of great integrity, a man of faith. He was a member of the Bishop Rice Council, in addition to what Michael had already stated. His community service to this town goes without saying. He was a man of true faith, a member of the Bishop Rice Council, Knights of Columbus, had the distinction of being a Grand Knight and a Supreme Grand Knight. He enjoyed giving back to the town and the community that he loved. He was a long-time and lifelong member of the Ashland Lions Club, and he dedicated himself to this community in more ways than one. He was part of the coffee clutch up at Honeydew, so if you ever needed to see any of those guys, they were up there, and they're all sadly missing him. And I don't know if you folks knew this about Izzy, but he had a baseball card collection that would choke a horse. It was immense, and if he has close to 1 million cards, I wouldn't be surprised.
Wow.
I wouldn't be surprised. His man cave up over his garage is just dedicated to all baseball trivia and regalia. Just it's incredible.
Quite the room.
Great guy. He was a family man. He spoke softly, but what he said came out huge. And I would send my sincerest condolences from this board and to everybody else, to Maureen and to his two sons, Wayne and Todd, and their families, respective families. I've known Izzy for many years. It's been over 40 years. When I got out of the police academy, I've had many mutual calls that I had to go with to Framingham and work together. Izzy was always there as a firefighter and paramedic, or an EMT, and we worked greatly together, and that's how I first met him and his brother as well. So Walter, they were both firefighters in Framingham. That's how our paths came, and I hope again our paths will meet again soon. So he wore that fire uniform as a true professional. He wore it with pride and distinction. And Izzy, until we meet again, my pal, God bless you.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Well,
Thanks,
well
Joe.
said, Joe.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's very nice. Very nice.
Yolanda, you're up next.
Well, I'm just hearing the news about Izzy, so
Yeah.
I had read some of the updates that came from, Lions, and I just want to add, I remember one of my first times meeting Izzy was when Fox 25 came to Ashland, and he got interviewed as, I forget why, but, and I, got to know him more and more throughout my time here in the community, so my condolences as well to Maureen and his two sons and the extended family. It is definitely a loss for our community. Just a couple of other things. Congratulations to the Ashland Public Library on their Once Upon a Book Fest that happened this past Saturday. It was a fun day. It's always one of those things you wish more people would have come out. I think they had a few more than last year, and it's one of those events that will continue to grow. But it was the number of children's authors and illustrators, and I actually got to watch the current gentleman who is illustrating Paddington Bear for his books and movies.
Cool.
Talk about how to draw Paddington Bear, and it was unbelievable how he did it. So it was great to be able to help out and be there to support that program. I also give my congratulations to AEFI. It's always a fun event, and I too would be much happier had it been real money. But it was still a fun event, and it's always great to give back and support all the great work they do for our schools. The Mendez walkthrough as well. 2 Saturdays ago, or last Saturday? I think it was last Saturday. It's always interesting to walk in and see the difference from even 4 weeks ago. It is on schedule, and it's just amazing what that building is going to be for our students. Upcoming, we have, I'll be attending the marathon event, which is happening next Thursday, April 6th. It's happening at Hopkinton Center for the Arts. It is a commemoration of the last time 100 years ago that the Boston Marathon started here in Ashland. I don't know that I consider it a negative thing. We had no opportunity to keep it because they extended the length of the race. So I think our history here is Ashland being the original starting line. It's good that it's going to be acknowledged. And the last thing is happy spring. It might not feel like it today, but we are in spring.
It did today.
Today it did. Last night it didn't. Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah, very good.
Thanks, Yolanda.
My
You're up
turn?
next, Steve.
Uh-oh.
Do you have a list?
I have a few things, but I'll try to be as brief as possible. I know we
don't want to go
talked
past
about
10
9
o'clock.
o'clock. We're not. But
Settling in, Steve.
I've only got 3 more meetings
I
here,
know.
right? So I'm going to use it up.
Never stopped you the previous 12 years.
So I also want to extend my sympathies to the Asenko family as well. My one observation about Izzy is at Lions breakfast, the monthly breakfast, and Izzy would always do the cracking the eggs, and of course there'd be more shells in the eggs than there would be yolks. But, we always laughed because it's all protein anyway, right? So it all worked out. But, he was always, and one of the things at the breakfast is always the day after a board meeting. So he would he always watched our board meetings and always had some commentary but always respectfully and always, and that was just the measure of the man. And so I think we're all going to miss him, certainly going to miss him at breakfast. So Michael had mentioned earlier this quiet zone lawsuit that's going on, and I think the board needs to be aware of it. I'm not sure, the article described the lawsuit generated by a former MBTA commuter rail engineer who was part of a death on his train, and also an attorney who had a friend that was killed by a train. So they're looking to actually have the state pull back all the quiet zones. The article talks specifically about Beverly. Beverly apparently has 5 quiet zone crossings in town. So, something for the board to be aware of, considering the fact that we are engaged in a quiet zone project. Also, the fact that we've had this commuter rail,
Right.
several circumstances recently, so just need to be aware of it.
And just, not to interrupt you, Steve, but just to follow on, I did request that article mentioned a number of accident reports that the T has put together, and I had requested that, but still haven't heard anything.
You still
so I'm
haven't
going
got
to-
the one
No.
from our.
Yeah, well,
recent one?
that, and plus their whole system-wide review,
Yeah.
to go to your point, so I'm going to try to hit that up
Yeah.
again, because I don't know why
They're looking to get, this lawsuit is looking to get the the ban, or the use of whistles to remain the way it is through most of the state now, but also include, flashing lights and barriers as well. So, it's
Yeah.
not quite sure how, how viable this lawsuit is, but, you should just be aware of it, right?
Yeah.
So I want to tie this together, so just bear with me a moment. This is the end. So we had a request or we have been put on notice as a board at our next board meeting that we were going to be presented at citizen participation with some sort of scientific
Oh, yeah.
information.
Oh, yeah.
And
Next meeting, right?
now, I've got a couple comments on that, but primarily, I think this has to do with Wi-Fi and electromagnetic sensitivity. Scientific area, some people call it science, some people call it pseudoscience. I'm not qualified to judge that. It seems to me that this is more an issue for the Board of Health. And if you look at the email and you look at some of the links, you will see where typically boards of health are the ones that weigh in on this. But reading that and then thinking about, some of the other issues that go on in the world and trying to put some kind of measure of priority here. So I'm connecting this to the FDA just approving over-the-counter Narcan today. And, that reflects the fact that there has been this enormous jump in fentanyl deaths over the last 2 years. I mean, just enormous. So clearly, governments everywhere are struggling to try to control this epidemic of opioid deaths. And this is a solution for reversing if you are in that situation. And I guess I would suggest that anybody that has a family member that has that kind of those kinds of issues, it's probably a good idea to have this on your shelf,
Yeah.
And I mean, it is truly an epidemic.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much my soapbox tonight. But I would suggest next week or the next board meeting when we have Senate President and a state rep here, I would suggest that we allow them to be the first folks on the agenda and push citizen participation maybe a little bit further down in the agenda, just so that they can, be here. We can utilize their time most efficiently. And no issue with not having citizen participation, but maybe just adjust it.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're also gonna have town council here.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
we'll have
I mean, we've done
we'll
that
have to figure out
before.
what
We've pushed citizen participation to,
Oh, yeah, no, I don't
Yeah.
mind moving.
Did we give them a time yet for Jack and Karen, or?
We had said pretty early on in the agenda.
Oh,
We
okay.
haven't said, we
Yeah,
haven't
I don't
said,
think we-
Okay.
Exact time.
no.
Yeah, we give them a time. As
Yeah.
long as people know the time, so they don't come in
Yeah.
here expecting to,
yeah, so that's my, again, my soapbox, so thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Rob, you're up next.
Yeah, I just have, and my condolences, of course, go to Maureen and the family. I have a quick Izzy story, so, and this is actually fairly recent. I was visiting him at the hospital, and he was, had a lot of issues physically. He was in tough shape, and he was speaking in a very low whisper, but he was all there, he was, and I said, well, so you're gonna go to rehab, then what are you gonna do? And he says, I'm gonna run for the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
So, and then he looked at me and I said, okay. But anyway, so we'll miss, he's a great citizen, great person. Just a few items. One thing I noticed when I was in, well, it's tough to go on after that. But just one thing, Joe, in terms of all your traffic stuff, a few years ago, we did that step bump, I think, on Whittemore, and that was on that table, the table to slow down the traffic. So I'd like to hear at some point how that's working out. And the other thing I just want to pass on, that I was in Westwood going to a place called Hale Reservation, and you go through all these great houses on back roads and with little roads, and apparently they were concerned about speeding because like every quarter mile there was a speed bump on a public road with a big sign that said slow 15 miles an hour. And it occurred to me, like, why aren't we doing that in some places where we think it might work? And they apparently, there's these speed bumps and they can plow the snow off them, and it's something we should consider and look at, like, because we've got a number, people just complain about speeding, and we're not able to really, but a couple speed bumps, there's really just does the trick. And if Westwood could do it, I think it'd be great if we looked at it. So just throwing that thought out there. And I also I attended shortly for a brief. Joe was there on the affordable housing seminar, and there was I was only able to spend 15 or 20 minutes watching it, but there's a woman came on from an organization called the Metro West Housing Collaborative, I think, who specialize in affordable housing. They're a nonprofit that has a lot of public funding, and I thought they'd be a great match for our Affordable Housing Committee to come and talk to them about how to give you guys some technical assistance on how to develop that land, the farm, the Simpson property. And just they're involved right now in a project in Hudson and in Newton and other places where they're helping local affordable housing trusts get things done. So it seemed to me like this would be a good person to call in and say, hey, how can your organization help us? They get loans, apparently they have sources of funding. So anyway, just a thought for you guys on the Affordable Housing Trust, and I saw her. Yolanda, you brought up the marathon event, so you're going. I did accept the invitation. Are other folks going as well, or everybody's going? Okay.
I'll be there.
Yeah, it sounds like a great event.
Yep.
Wish kind of it was in Ashland, and we'd been doing it, but anyway, other than that.
Yeah, we have a pretty good invite list there.
Yeah, that's good. You guys did a lot of work on that, so.
I think we
Good.
tried to capture most folks
Yeah.
that had a connection.
Yep.
Yeah, great. So that's my board report, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
All right, thanks, Rob. I just have a few reminders. One, if you haven't done your town council evaluation,
Oh, yes.
try to get that done by Friday.
Can we get it sent out again? Because I couldn't find it in my,
Susan, can
email
you
it to
send,
you?
Susan's gonna send it out to
because she sent,
Okay,
or I
thanks.
like found the email and I couldn't access the file, so.
Yeah, I was having a problem. I called Susan today because I was having a problem with the
Oh,
Google
okay,
form
must be
too.
some-
It was allowing me to edit it, and I'm like, I don't want to edit this Google form. I just want to complete it.
Want to fill it in?
Yeah. So if you haven't, so Susan will send it out.
Great.
Thank you, Susan. We had scheduled our April meeting, so our next meeting, we're meeting on the 12th because the first Wednesday of April is Passover.
Passover, right.
So we're meeting on the 12th, and then we had set a tentative date, if needed, for April 26th. So I think we're probably at the point where we definitely need the meeting on the 26th, because otherwise, the first meeting in May is actually town meeting, and then we won't meet again as a board until 2 weeks after town meeting, which is after,
Yeah.
so it's after the election too, so.
2 more board report opportunities.
Yeah, boy. And
Two
Steve,
more.
Steve's
Two more.
sharpening his pencil.
I'm unlikely to be at that meeting. 'cause
So
I
you're
will be-
unlikely
Yeah,
on the
I've
26th?
scheduled a vacation, so.
Okay, all right.
So,
Is there any other conflicts? Is everyone else okay?
But I won't be at the meeting on the 17th. So I'm going to
Yes.
ask that we wait to do a reorg until our
First meeting in
May
June?
17th.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Yep, no
Thank
problem. Yeah.
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 And I'm traveling, I thought, well, maybe I could do it remotely, but I'm traveling for business and it's a 3-hour time
Yeah,
difference, so
yeah, that's,
can't sit down at 4 o'clock.
we can definitely do that.
Thank you.
So we'll plan to meet on the 26th. Okay. One other thing I wanted to just mention, I don't know if you guys saw this, but I thought it was really cool. The MWRTA received a grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation for $985,000 to electrify their fleet.
Yeah.
So I think they were one of like 59 federal grants from the Biden administration. So I thought that was super cool. So congratulations to Jim Nee, our friend.
Yeah,
who's
good
at the
job.
MWRTA
Oh,
and
right,
his
yeah, I
team.
saw that, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Great.
So So it's good that there's grant money out there for that. So,
Yeah.
you know, when we talk about like this warrant article at town meeting where we're looking to, you know, potentially electrify purchases that we make, you know, maybe there's some grant money out there for
Yeah,
that.
maybe
So-
there's 8 million that could
It's-
be.
There's gonna be at, the Metro West Regional Collaborative, we're gonna discuss the school bus fleet
Okay.
and how
Oh,
we
yeah.
can,
Great idea.
from a regional perspective,
Yeah.
figure out how many bus companies there are,
Yeah.
and does it make sense to do that for the
Get
school
away
buses?
from those
Because,
diesels.
because we don't own the buses, so we don't have
Correct, we have to
control
deal with
over that.
companies.
Yeah,
So,
Well, maybe if the federal monies are available, maybe that's something that we could look into,
right,
Yeah.
so.
and maybe save bus fees.
yeah, I think you're,
It's a
I know,
tough
I'm
business.
dreaming again,
Dreaming
I
there,
know,
Joe.
I'm sorry.
It's a tough business to be in, Joe.
Yep.
But so
It is.
that's great news for the MWRTA. And
yeah,
the only other thing-
congratulations to them.
The only other thing I wanted to mention, which is, actually, Beth Reynolds brought it to me, and I thought it was a really good idea. So, as you guys know, over the last few years, I've done office hours here and there with some varying degrees of success of how many people come. You know, it tends to not be
A lot.
a lot. And I love to like have office hours because I think it's a good idea for us
Sure.
to like, to have set times where people can come and chat. Beth had sent me, something that Needham is doing, and Needham has, is starting, basically it's from the town, so it's not me as an individual doing office hours,
Sure.
but that the select board is holding office hours, like once every 2 weeks. They rotate, and then they publicize it, so the town is publicizing it, so
Oh,
things
that's a
like,
great idea.
you know, Michael's newsletter and, you know, the town Facebook
no,
page
great
and stuff
idea.
like
I
that.
think it's a great idea.
So, if you guys think that that's a good idea,
I support it and
Okay.
can be in the rotation.
okay, because that would, you know, I think it's a good thing,
Sure,
so
we can
we all
I
take.
mean, I think about I think there was 2 years where every Saturday at the farmer's
Yeah,
market,
we
there was
did.
at least
Yeah,
one or two
informal,
select board
yeah.
members, we
Yeah.
had a table,
Yeah,
so.
the farmer's market is,
Yep.
that's a great idea, so we
I
could
mean,
definitely.
probably not every Saturday now, and I know we'd have to
Yeah.
run
It's
it
great
by.
for the-
We wouldn't watch you there every Saturday.
No,
No.
but it
So-
might be good to reach out to the farmer's market as they're
Okay.
making their schedule to say, can we at least once or twice come as the select board and represent and be there?
If you're interested in that, seriously,
I am.
you know, somebody put out an email to Gene Walker,
Yeah.
who manages the community tent,
Yep.
Okay.
and get in the rotation. And there's, depending on how many requests we have, occasionally we'll add a second tent.
Yeah.
So, you know, I would say the
So
likelihood is
are
pretty
you
good.
willing to send that? Thank
I
you,
will
Brandy.
absolutely do that. Yep.
Just make sure we stay within the four corners of open meeting law. If
Well,
we
it
have
wouldn't be
more
all
than
of us
one-
at once.
No,
Well, I'm
we'll
just
be-
saying, if a couple
But
show
two at
up,
a
or
time.
a third
Oh,
person
yeah.
shows
Yeah.
up, you just, you
Uh-oh,
know.
at the,
Yeah.
give 'em the
As long as you're
cold
not
shoulder,
deliberating or
turn away.
voting.
Yeah,
We've done it, so.
so, but if,
Okay,
if.
thank you for
Like, does
taking
that
that on,
sound
Brandy.
doable, like to put it in the newsletter and to kind of codify something? Because I think that might make a big difference, in- rather than me just throwing something out on the happy board.
Sure.
and,
Right.
Meeting at the bagel
Makes
table.
sense.
Yep,
So-
yeah, good idea.
So, thank
We
you to
could-
Beth for,
It's interesting.
Ending.
Yeah, that's, what about other elected officials, from municipal officials? Having them maybe be there as well, or something, you know?
We have, actually, the Historical Commission has come the last several years, so they all kind of individually, Conservation has come, so,
market,
you know,
yeah.
it's open to
Farmers market.
everybody. Yeah,
So you could maybe
yeah,
So, it's a good idea.
yeah.
working with them.
We just got away for a number of years ago, we did have a, you know, a dedicated Ashland tent.
Yeah.
And so all the boards and committees would rotate.
It's a community tent, right?
It was a community tent, but it was, we had two at the time, one dedicated to Ashland boards and committees. And the first couple of years it worked, you know, maybe the first year it worked pretty well. And then I think people just got tired of making that commitment on a Saturday.
Yep, and we
Yeah.
had people
So it
that
kinda fizzled out.
didn't
I
show
started
up.
that way.
You started what, fizzled
With the
out?
problem, yeah, I fizzled out right from the beginning.
Yeah, but I think the first year or two, it was pretty popular, and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I was helping manage that and getting the
Yeah,
boards
no,
and
it
committees
was
lined up,
good.
so it was nice
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
Jean and the farmer's market took it over themselves, but,
So I will reach out to Jean and
Great,
see if I
thank
can
you.
get that, and we'll maybe start that like, maybe after town meeting, you know, just to start the.
Sure.
Yeah.
The communications.
Or
and the-
it might make sense to try to have one, and I'd be willing to look at my schedule to have a select board before town meeting, so if people have questions about town meeting, we could be there to answer those questions.
There's that.
Sure, if you would like to do that, that would be great.
I could do that. I could look at my schedule. I could
Okay.
pick a date.
Okay. It's hard with like April vacation and everything else coming up. It's.
Yeah, there's some of us who aren't going away for April vacation, so. But yeah, I'd be willing to pick a date and get it to Michael and,
Okay,
okay.
all right, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. So, you have one more thing?
I do,
Okay.
and I do, and
What
I
you
would be remiss if I didn't. But if anybody sees Bill Gath this coming Saturday,
Yeah.
April 1st, he turns 80.
No.
Wow. Yeah, he's going to kill me when I
Yeah,
tell
he's
him.
gonna kill you.
Yeah, he's
No,
gonna,
he's not 80, but
You brought up Bill.
it is his birthday.
Could I?
It is his birthday.
And happy birthday to Bill. But he actually, I feel a little guilty because he sent out the invitation to talk about the emergency fund. I have not talked to him. Is there something that?
Why
I mean,
don't
is
we
there-
put that on?
let's
a-
put
why
on
don't we put
another
on
Put on an agenda,
Okay.
yeah.
Because
Sounds
Jen and
good.
I met with him.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
So
Very good.
we can do that. We can.
Sounds good.
Okay.
But happy birthday, Willie.
happy birthday,
Happy
Bill.
birthday, and a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we are adjourned at 9:47 tonight. Good night, everyone.
Good night,
We'll see you
everyone.
at our next meeting on April 12th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you,
Good night.
everyone.
All right.